more. I've heard something about this. Yeah.
Well, I can't because you know as much as me. No details at all. So I don't know where it came from, actually. I think somebody said it in passing. So we'll have to go on the news, I think, and see what's what. But sounds
right.
interesting.
I've probably got something on my no.
Yeah. So yeah, something to do with.
I thought,
I thought it was Nefertiti.
Well, hang on. No. Hang on. Nefertiti. No, I've been to the tomb of Nefertari in the Valley of the Queens. Nefertiti, yeah, could be her. Nefertiti,
Right.
Nefertiti, Nefertari. Easy to get mixed up. Yeah, Cleopatra, I was told, but they may have got it wrong.
Okay, fair enough. Right. Anything? Right, Anne. If you tell us your news, but don't be too long about it.
Well, mainly I just was looking at the. I was thinking of the prehistoric art, and somebody put on the horses of Chevaux, is it?
I think so.
Of the French caves, and I suddenly thought, I was thinking, well, they're so realistic, I wonder what about the line, I mean,
how does that develop? Yeah, I'm glad that's taken effect. How that actually comes into everything, really. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
And when you say the line and how that works, what part of this line that we're following? From what angle are we looking at this? Because everything perceivably can be taken over by the line. Are we talking about the line as an art, as the line as a tracing, or are we talking about the development? What are we talking about there?
I suppose yeah, the development really, and also the development, and yet not development, if you know what I mean. It's they were doing like realistic drawings of animals, and then it sort of became more like symbols, not symbols, pictograms and things like that, not so realistic, more designy.
Yeah, but then again, aren't you going against all your artistic thinking? In fact, that you go into art college and 1 minute you're doing realism, and then the next minute you're going into the likes of Picasso.
Abstraction, yeah. I mean,
so in other words, is that what is that? It's not devolving, is it?
Yeah, I mean, no, it's not really, not devolving. No, it's just sort of struck me, and I don't know really.
No, you do know. You came up with the idea that we're following the line, and that's good enough for me.
Yeah, I can see that, and then I can see it moving further.
That is good enough for me. Yeah, no, that is good enough for me. So that's found fine.
But the other thing was, I found this writing on Tumbalum, and the Normans did build a motte and bailey on top of it.
Yeah. This perspective that we've got Marlborough Mound, and we've got that sort of evolution in history.
Yeah.
And the reuse of the archaeology within other generations. Exactly. So this is the thing to be very, very open. It's not textbook anymore, is it?
What?
No, history is not textbook anymore.
Oh no. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, they didn't use the whole mound. It was only a little bit of the mound. They did a mound on top of the mound, because the mound is huge.
But that's again following that's following the direction of exactly what Tim Ingold would say, because you can't any longer say that you've got a Roman site. You can't say that. You can't say that we've got a medieval site. Um,
Yeah.
there's a site actually, right, which I wasn't meant to be doing today, but I might actually do it. There's a site that I'm not meant. It would actually be good to do Tom and Amur, which is a mound which is near Harla, and that would be a good site to look at, and yeah, maybe I might do that tonight, but I've obviously got to get the images up on Google. I wasn't meant to be doing that. But right, anything you'd like to say, Richard? Because we're well into it. We're sort of well into what we're doing now. So go on. Anything, Richard?
No, not really, no. I got a
Right,
picture of the knife angel for you.
Oh, right. Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
all
yes.
right. All right then. Okay, this is relevant. Right. Do you know, I gotta be honest with you. That looks like something out of
Game of
no,
Thrones.
that actually looks quite good.
Something out of Doctor Who.
Yeah, Doctor Who. Yeah.
Or Game
Yeah.
of Thrones.
It's,
Yeah.
it's,
That looks really interesting. It really does. Yes. No, that really does look interesting. So yeah, thanks for that, Richard. So
The only thing is they haven't put your piece in there, so
what?
They haven't what? They haven't
What?
put.
Hang
Charles
on.
piece in the Barrion district.
My column's not in there again this week.
No.
Oh. Oh dear.
Oh, I am getting a. Hang on, what this week?
Yeah.
What? I'm actually quite shocked because the lady who actually does the page, she said, "Oh, can you get it over to me on Monday so I can get it ready for the newspaper for Tuesday?" So I did it on Monday night, and it wasn't used.
Oh.
And that was actually quite a good piece, right? Okay. So what we're going to do, we're gonna actually share. So in other words, they use a piece about Newport in the Barron District News.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that. Oh, it must have been the vibes.
Yeah, I think it was the vibes. Very much so. Looking at those vibes, right? Okay, so how many of you have actually been to caerwent?
Yes.
Would you be familiar with this mound in caerwent?
No, but
We've been there with you, Carl.
we've been there with you.
Yeah, but hang on. I just said, Dan, would you be familiar with this mound in caerwent? So you have been there.
No, I can't remember it.
Well, okay. Well, this mound itself is basically stereotypical of everything that we've been doing over the past many months. And 1 minute you're looking at wonderful walls constructed in the Roman period, and the next minute you're looking at a mound. And one of the things that we were mentioning last week is that it's basically sited directly where a tower is.
Yeah.
And basically the corner tower, one of those great big towers, and that occupies that position. And it speaks of something a little bit more sort of complicated than just building a mound. They went through the effort of building this mound, right, when there was probably be a usable tower that they could use, which they didn't really incorporate in the mound other than actually using that as ballast. Now, personally, it would be a great excavation project to actually dig through that mound to get to the tower. However, the nature of that archaeology would be that you would destroy this mound, this Norman period mound, to actually get to the tower. Now, the stone tower. Now, there's another point to be made here. It's presumed that this is Norman, right? Now, there's a problem with presuming everything there's a problem when we're looking at archaeology now, when we're presuming that everything is a certain monument because of the way it looks, right? Equally, I know this is going to sound nonsense, and this is meant to sound like nonsense. It would be equally plausible for somebody to say, "Oh, actually, this is a burial mound," right? Now, it's unlikely to be a burial mound. It's got a flat top. It's well built, right? And it does make you wonder. It does make you ask the question. It's going to be a very, very small wooden tower, whatever way you look at it. And you've got to ask why it was built, right? Now, why was that built? For defensive reasons? Was that built to make a show of power? Was that built to make a mark on the landscape? Was that built for some other reason? Now, when you put this monument against looking at, you've got a whole flow of images. There we go, right? And it looks quite small. There's some really great views here. This is a really nice photograph because I know every single inch of that mound because it's a mound that I found my first piece of Roman Samian pottery when I was 10 in a molehill, right? But it happened to be a piece of Roman Samian ware pottery, nothing more, nothing less. And when I say nothing more, nothing less, that's what it was. Now, when we think about the idea of the line and Tim Ingold, we can immediately say that overnight, Caerwent is not just a Roman landscape, it's also a Norman landscape. And this is the next statement I'm going to make is going to be something that you're going to find very difficult to take. At the time that the Normans have occupied this locality, and we're going to take a little bit of a guess on dates, right? This mound hasn't been excavated. We're going to take a guess on the dates. That was probably there roughly by about 80 years, 1080 years AD, 1080. So approximately 14 years after the Battle of Hastings on the 14th of October in 1066. And the thing that is going to be a bit difficult to take, therefore, the rest of the site at Caerwent is Norman, because it's now a Norman site. It's now a Norman landscape. It's no longer a Roman landscape, even though most of it's been built in the Roman era. It's now a Norman landscape. So this is one of those very, very weird things to try and get your mind around. And now, equally, it's a modern landscape. It's no longer a Roman landscape, and it's no longer a Norman landscape. It's a modern landscape. The monuments there live and breathe within a modern world, a modern landscape. What I'm going to do, I've actually got somebody who's actually put a message online on YouTube now that I'm looking at. She says, when I was in Rome, I noticed that a lot of the crumbling ruins were sitting on top of megalithic looking blocks. I think the Romans loved building on top of other culture stuff. Now that there is actually a really good point. And thank you very much. A person called Lady Flibblesworth. She actually contacted me by email, but that is a really, really good point. And the point being made there is what was at Caerwent before the Roman era site. Equally, that is equally as important than focusing on the Roman walls and the mound. I think that's a very, very good point. Now, what we then need to do, we need to, I think, I like that image, but I really like this one, right? What we then need to do, and it basically says, a motte and bailey castle protected by a ditch was built in one corner in the late 1060s. I'm not going to go with 1060s, I'm going to go with 1080s, right? And the reason why I'm going to go with that is that the Normans weren't really at Chepstow until about 1067, January 1067. So I'm gonna move it a little bit further forward, and I'm gonna. But again, we're not really interested in dates, are we? But what we want to do is we want to put in the word caerwent map. And what I might do, which is very appropriate, is actually bring in the site of Tommen and Muir, which I wasn't going to do today, but it's a brilliant site, and I do really know it well because I've been there, and it was a great place. Now, the map, the one that we're going to look at is this one, right? I love this map because it's clear on the screen. It's really good. And actually, where it's got the word public house, where the X is there, XV, that's the wall that identified as being Roman there. And that's the Roman wall that caerwent they're actually excavated, but it's not actually on the plan. So there it is, Castle Mound. And it's really, really interesting that you've got a castle mound there, and it really speaks volumes. Now, Bill, I'm not picking on you at all, but you were right to assume that Roman towns and cities were perfectly linear places, but this is not linear at all. This is not linear. We've already done caerwent, but I would like to remind us that the gateway there, the south gate there, right, isn't actually aligned up with the north gate, which is very, very strange. So Bill's idea of caerwent being very linear and being very Roman, Bill, I'm putting words in your mouth. I know this is wrong, but the presumption that caerwent has got these perfectly linear walls and everything sort of nicely set up. No, that's not. It's sort of rhomboid, isn't it? Sort of that type of sign is slightly off. It's sort of slightly odd, right? So this is a thing. And then we actually come back to why are they building this mound when they've got the rest of the place that they can actually use for defensive reasons and defensive purposes. Now, that's a really, really interesting point. When you've already got walls that are upstanding, and the other thing for me personally, right, is why didn't they actually use the stone at caerwent to actually build a solid castellated site? Because if you want to get an idea of scale of this mound, right, the top of this mound, there you go. You can see the top of the mound there, right? If you want to go over to the temple, right? So just compare the sizes. You've all been in the temple with me, right? Look at the top of the mound. Look at the temple. You know how big the temple is, don't you? It's very, very small. So you're not really going to be doing much with the castle mound. And this is a very, very interesting discussion point. Why? What is going on? And the answer is that order and disorder, right? Remember that from a few weeks ago, order and disorder. Now, the mound is ordered because they wanted to put it there. It was like the Norman type of thing to do. It was a bit of order. So that's why you've got the mound there, right? But maybe to the Normans, the rest of the landscape is disordered because it's from a different time period. It's from a different moment in time, and it is not really associated with their way of thinking. So even though, at this stage, right, the castle mound would have been looking across lots of buildings that were still sticking up. There would have been bits of in fact, it was very likely that the forum there would have still been standing. Some of the columns would have still been upstanding. We don't have earthquakes in this country unless the columns have been nicked. It's quite likely that some of the columns would have been upstanding still at caerwent. Now, and we are going to go to Tommen and Muir, but my mind is like thinking 10 times to the dozen. What I would like to do is I would like to make another point that we've already made, but again, following the line, trying to interpret this landscape, trying to work out what's going on. We got that there, images of said Cardiff Castle. Now, the two things that our caerwent and Cardiff Castle have in common. The one is that the walls that towards the top of the screen there, all the way around, all the way onto St. Mary Street, right? And there, all the way around the back, other than these apartments down in the left-hand corner, that is all based on Roman masonry, Roman work. And Bill would be right in saying that that is almost a perfect military form of a fort. And he'd be right there. But it's not always that way. So the thing is, if we go back to the idea of caerwent building the city walls, the concept in the Roman period is that a sense of order in the way they built the walls, which do not follow the copybook of the Roman ideal, when in fact order is maintained in the Roman period, actually at Cardiff, when the fort is more or less a perfect shape, but it's a square fort rather than sort of a rectangular fort. It's more square, and there are different forms there. The other thing that Cardiff has in common with the likes of caerwent, and we're going to spit this out there, is that the Normans wished to create a mound in amongst all these ruins, right? And then that dominates this world. This dominates this world within this the walls of the Roman fort at Cardiff. Now, I remember doing this before. It was, and I did this in a different context before. It's the idea that the Romans, that the Normans are owning the Roman landscape. They're saying, look what we can do. We can build a mound. Well, it doesn't really work at caerwent. I got to be honest with you, but it does work here because this dominates the landscape. The walls that are still standing at this time, when this is actually when this is here, right? The walls that you know, the walls could be still used for defensive reasons, but they're not. And what they do, they decide to build this massive mound in the middle, and the tower itself is actually built out of the Roman masonry, definitely, and it's known as a shell keep. That's a shell keep in the middle. So that's really, really interesting to think that they're making use of the landscape. And in other words, I'm going to say this: that they didn't need to build that there, right? They could have built it anywhere, but they decided to build it there. It's the same with caerwent. They decided to build one at caerwent, and also the same situation is to be seen actually in the middle of Caerleon, right? Because this is the effect at Caerleon as well, where the Normans actually place a moated site within the walls at Caerleon as well, which again is they're doing it, and it's again it's a new culture, it's a new civilization. We're here, boys. We're here, girls. And this is the effect that we want to have on the landscape. This is our hallmark. This is what we're about. This is who we are. This is where we're going. This is our direction. Don't mess with us. Now, there's a beautiful site that I visited with my beautiful daughter Bethan a few years back. Yes, it was a strange day out. We were looking over to Trousville nuclear power station, and at the same time we're looking at a site known as Tommen y Mur. And if anyone correct me on the recording afterwards, and fair enough, probably got it wrong. But it's basically the mound it's Tommen Mound rise within the landscape of Mur, M-U-R. So we'll look at that as a translation. Tommen's right, the Mur might be slightly wrong, but what we want to do is we want to go on to this. So it's unlikely that any of you guys would have been to Tommen y Mur, but I'm actually presuming that you haven't, right? So here we go, Tommen. There we go, Tommen y Bala. There you go, Tommen y Mur straight away. Right now, this is a very, very interesting site, right? And what have we got? Look at that there! Oh my bloody god! You've got this mound at Tommen y Mur. Now, I'm gonna spit something out, and then I'm going to recant. So the first thing we need to say that there, all the way around, that is a Roman fort, right? It's got its own bathhouse outside. It's got loads of other buildings. There's a little amphitheatre there, everything there, little houses and so on and so on. And we'll come to you in a moment, right? And that mound is undoubtedly definitely Norman, but I don't think it is. And you were going to say something, and this is actually near Harlech, near Trawsmynydd Power Station. It overlooks it. Go on, Anne. Go
Well,
for it.
I was only going to say that, you know, when all the grass circles were showing up, because of the dry weather, we also saw Roman, and they weren't square, they were rectangular and quite rhomboid.
Where specifically were we talking about, Anne? Because
Well,
you know that could be anywhere.
we were looking at a map with you, I think.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
On that, you know, aerial photographs.
Yes.
Aerial photographs they were. And
Yes. Was it of this site?
I think that was, yeah, that was one of them, yeah.
Yeah. Well, at the time we were, I can remember what we were doing. I think we were looking at you sort of looking at aerial views of the landscape.
Because
And
the crop circles that we found
Yeah, exactly.
as well, which was the Roman forts. So they were easier to sort of locate with, you know, when there wasn't any remains at all. I
Yes.
can't remember what area it was now, but anyway, yeah. So they were that sort of shape.
Yes. In some cases, exactly.
Yeah, in some cases, yeah.
But the one thing that I am going to say, the one thing that I am going to spit out there, is that it's always presumed when you look at monuments like this that mound is Norman, but we also know that and actually if we go to the Covline website where this is, I wasn't going to do this today, but Covline has got some really nice records out there, and it should come up with loads of nice images. And there we go. And what you can see is a very, very diverse, developed landscape. But there, yeah, again, look at that mound.
Yeah.
It's been presumed that is actually that mound itself is actually Norman. But the landscape itself reeks in history, because what we've got, you can actually look down there on the left-hand side, you can see the outline of another fort, and you can basically, there's lots going on here, and you can see a little sort of square thing there, and you can see another outline of a fort, a square fort. Well, there's lots going on within this landscape, and we can't always jump and think that everything is Norman because it looks Norman. Because on this side where we're looking at in Harlech, this was still part of the kingdom of Gwynedd. This was part of the kingdom of Gwynedd, and it would have been undoubtedly a mound that would have been built by a local lord rather than Norman. And the strange thing is, well, they're doing the similar type of thing. They're building something to dominate the landscape. It does look very different from the one at Cardiff. It looks very different from the one at caerwent, but it's still making a connection that is right or wrong. And what is wrong? To me, it's not Norman. It's within the kingdom of Gwynedd. So we can then assume that it's part of one of the local lords associated with one of the kings of Gwynedd. And the other thing as well is with a site like this, it is all about interpretation. Now, one of the things, and I don't think you can there, basically over there. Between those two sets of building, they have actually reconstructed a Roman wall, right? It's a nice Roman wall that they've reconstructed, Now that's really, really interesting. That's a really, really interesting point. When we're talking about following the line, and we're talking about the landscape, the point is that they got a reconstructed Roman wall. And having a reconstructed Roman wall directly on a Roman wall within a landscape that became medieval, within a modern landscape full of buildings, is a very, very interesting thing, a very interesting thing going on. And one thing, Anne, and everybody else, is that Tim Ingold didn't put into the factor of reconstructing history. Do you see where we are there? In other words, we're recreating history within our perspective. So if I can basically, you know, this is great. I love these images. Just so these are Royal Commission on Ancient Historical Monument images, and we just scroll through these. Absolutely brilliant. Just go online, type in Tom and a Muir, and again, loads of, and you can see as you go down the image, you can see another fort coming in there on the left-hand corner there, towards the bottom there. You can see another fort. So it's a very rich landscape, that eventually become owned by this mound. What becomes important on this landscape is actually the mound rather than a Roman site itself. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to see if I can get some more images up on Tom and Muir. Wasn't going to do this today, but I don't know. I must have suggested it. But there you go. That is a reconstructed Roman wall. There it is, a reconstructed Roman wall. So there's a question I'm going to ask Bill in a moment, right? And it's a question that I've got to think about as I'm reading this. Somebody, Our Lady of Fiddlesworth, have also said, I love the connections here. You have piqued my curiosity. The mound in that position must have some significance. Again, the idea of significance, right? It's again thinking. We're going to naturally continue with doing more of this next week, but we've still got about 25 minutes of this lesson to go. Right. The question is, Bill, right? How does a reconstructed Roman wall fit in with Tim Ingold's landscape and following the line? Does it have a place to play within the overall interpreting the landscape and interpreting the history? Or should we ignore a reconstructed wall because it's done in the guises of somebody who's constructed this wall 1,800 years after the wall fell out of use? Do you understand my question? And if so, Bill, have you got an answer?
Well, I don't see the point of reconstructing a wall unless you intend bringing people in to see it. In other words, tourists. So is the site being developed for that purpose? Otherwise, I don't see the point in reconstructing the wall at all.
Well, to be honest, sorry, Bill, I interrupted. It's not on a tourist route, and it's bloody hard to find.
Yeah, it looks a very remote location, doesn't it, as well? But if there are other signs of Roman activity there, obviously you must have been in a very strategic position to control the local tribes.
Well, hang on, Anne. I want to come in on Bill there, right? Bill's got a very important point. Do we? That's got a little sign there. It's basically saying where the amphitheater is. You can't really make it out, but you go there, right? You go there and you're thinking, in other words, have we got room to reconstruct the past? Is reconstructing the past relevant? Is it given a wrong interpretation? Is there a value in reconstructing the past? There are too many questions now. You don't need to answer them. You just need to think about them. Have we got a right to reconstruct the past? That's the thing. Have we got a right to own this landscape in our eyes when we really didn't know what the past looked like? Right. Those are questions. Don't need to answer them, Anne.
Yeah.
Well, this article I'm reading about Tumbalum, it's got a lot of measurements on it and angles, and the the Romans were great at landscaping apparently, and creating sort of links, and apparently they used Tumbalum, to plot the Pleiades, like the stars, and also as a sun sunspots, you know, to get angles and things like that.
And we will naturally need. How do you spell Tumbarlam?
TWM.
Yeah.
BARLWM.
Right. Well, actually, Anne, right. Keep all that for next week because we're
Yeah,
gonna it's gonna lose us.
I've
We're gonna.
got to show you this because it's sort of. I think it's.
Hang on, Anne. I'm screen sharing, so I can't see it. Right? Can you, Anne? Can you just keep that? Can you just keep that for
Yeah.
a moment?
Yeah.
Just keep it for a moment because I'm gonna lose what I'm doing, right? Because the point we've come to Tom and Amur, right? I'm going to say that even those watching online, because there's 5 online as well, I'm going to presume that none of you have been there, right? I'm also going to presume that most of you haven't seen images of it. I'm going to presume that most of you didn't know it existed, right? Whether all that's right or wrong, it's part of the story, right? The question is, honing in on a question, right? Have we got a right to artificiate the past? Is therefore what we're creating part of the past? Is there a need for this? And what I'm not going to ask Bill again. I'm not going to ask Anne. I'm going to ask Richard. Do you understand my question? And secondly, Richard, can you answer that? Richard? Yeah, go for it.
Well, I think a lot of it depends how accurate you're actually rebuilding something. If you just speculated what you think it looked like, you know, if you've got a castle,
yeah,
and certain parts, you could rebuild that,
yeah,
and it would look right. It would match the. When you come into something that's Roman, you really got no idea.
So are we
speculating what you think it looked like?
So therefore, gradiate from this, and so because we've got a few other things I want to do today, actually, so what I'm getting at is when we talk about Tim Ingold, and let's just change the image a minute, right? When we're talking about what we've been doing and what we've been trying to understand, okay, this is a little map of this landscape. There's loads of stuff there. Yeah, okay, this is what we're looking at, right? So there's the road coming in up the top there. That's the road that you drive in on, right? No, I've got it the wrong way around. Sorry. The road at the bottom is the road you drive in on, right? That's where the sign is with the amphitheatre, right? And there's a point I'd like to make about the previous image, and there's a point I'd like to make here, right? And these are two interlinked. Now, what I'm getting at is is a reconstruction, which is actually part of the landscape, right? That inevitably becomes part of the history, whether it's right or wrong. And then we go down the avenue of saying, is the mound interpretation right or wrong? Is the rest of the landscape right or wrong, right? What I'm getting at is we don't necessarily need to reconstruct the past correctly. But I think the one thing that we must do is make sure that we realize that wall that's been reconstructed is labeled as a reconstruction, because it's bloody not. Right? This is the thing. The danger is now I've worked out what I need to say. Right? We work on these lectures, and this is what we do. I worked out what I want to say. Right? Tim Ingold, we've got all those layers mixed in, right? It would be very dangerous to then interpret the wall that has been reconstructed as part of the original Roman site. That would be dangerous, because then what we've done, we've time traveled, and we've made the past in our own image in this present day and age, and we've moved it back in the past context, which is very, very bad. And we've got to make sure that whatever reconstructions that we use are well labeled. We've got to say, look, this was built in 2000, right? Because that's when I believe the wall was built. This wall was built in 2000, but the original Roman wall there was built in 150 years AD, right? And we've got to make sure that the two bits of history are labeled, because if we don't, the past is going to be misinterpreted, and the interpretation could be very, very wrong. Basically, if we don't label that wall, and a mobile phone is found with it, then somebody in a future generation could say they had mobile phones in the Roman period. It may sound nuts, but that's where we're going. I need to say something about the image there, right? What I want to do is go back to what's written on the screen. I absolutely hate things being rebuilt in general, because history is rewritten so often, and naturally the ruins of the past would likely reflect these assumptions. That is smack on. Now, whoa, there's something very important about what I've just said, and what we've just discussed, and what I've just read out is very much linked with what I'm about to say. Right now, forget. It says a Norman moat, right? We've already discussed that, and that's for another thing. I don't believe it is. Right. I believe it's probably built sometime in about 1100s, 1200s. It's built by the Kingdom of Gwynedd, but that's that. We'll leave that one there. So forget that that's there. Erase it from where it is, right? So the other thing as well is, was the amphitheatre built at the same time as the fort? Was the parade ground built at the same time as the fort? Or was the Mancio built before the fort? Was the bathhouse built associated with the Mancio? Was the bathhouse associated with the Roman site? Right? Which Roman site came first on this map? Did phase 1 come first, or did phase 2 come first? When we look, where did the Roman road come into this? The bridge abutment. There's a bit of bridge there, right? The whole picture here is not telling us anything, because it's very confused. In the idea of Tim Ingold, what you've got ruins of earlier Roman stuff, and you've got later Roman stuff, and then you've got later Roman stuff. You've got this bit of Roman stuff, you've got that Roman stuff. When you look at Vindolanda, it's very, very complex. When you go to Vindolanda, you've got the civilian vicus, you've got the Roman site, and then it says the Roman site was reoccupied by this, and they did that, and they did this, and they did that. You can understand it, but it's not really always finely labeled. And when we are going to label a past, what I'm gonna do, right? Don't say anything. What I am going to do is say that what came first there. We don't like the word phases. I don't like the word dates, because we're never going to get the dates right. What came first there, and then what came next? Was that thing that came first still in use when the next thing came in? This is when history gets very interesting. This is when we start to understand history. But there is one thing from the teaching of Tim Ingold: the stuff that is in ruin is still around when the later site is there. So the stuff in ruin is still part of the later landscape, except the stuff in ruin is part of the earlier landscape. I wanted to make that very clear. And if it's not as clear as mud, hopefully what I'm trying to say is that nothing on that plan there was there at the same time. Very, very important point. Okay. So we've got very limited time now, and obviously what I would like to do next week is Tumbalum, but I actually wanted to do following the line in regards to the art line. And Anne's actually mentioned about this idea of cave art, which we've not actually done when we've actually followed the line. So this is something that we need to do. We've not done much in the way of archaeology and art and all the rest of it. So we need to do more of that in regards to the line that we're following. So what I'd like to do is I would like to skip and jump a few thousand years before this. However, before I do that, I'd like to make an observation. And I need to get another image of Tumbalum, not Tumbalum, you got that in my head, Common of Europe here, right? So if we go here, right, there it is, there's our legendary wall there. And what I could do is what I wanted to say, maybe from this image. This is also at Tomenamure. This is actually a building made out of the Roman stones and all the rest of it. We're presuming that. We've got to presume that, but it would seem a bit silly if you've got loads of stone around that you're not going to actually use it, right? So that point's in there. Now, it's not a Roman landscape anymore. It's a landscape that's been extensively altered. That is a cottage that would have still been in use 200 years ago. That is a cottage that was probably built in sometime in the 1700s. That is a cottage that had another life. That is a cottage that had that cottage had part of the context of the line and part of the landscape at one stage in time, right? But one thing so then that leads me on to the other point. So if we want to go back with another image, which I did have, which I'm going to do this very boring image in front. It refers to it as a Cistercian way. This is the road. Sort of, you can see Tomenamure there, the mound. This is one of the roads associated with Tomenamure. And you're thinking, what did the landscape actually look like 2,000 years ago? What did it look like 3,000 years ago? We won't know. We don't know. Traveling along that road, we're not going to get any answers because the landscape today is so completely different from what it was 2,000 years ago. So far different from what it was like 3,000 years ago. We can only guess. Do you know what, right? I drive through, naturally, to get places, I've got to go long distances. So when I go to work, I've got to go, it takes me 40, 45 minutes, or I might need to go Aberystwyth. It might take me 50 minutes. I might need to go to Llandovery 30 minutes. I might need to go to Barry 2 hours, and so on and so on. Right now, when we're thinking about all that, when we're actually putting all that in, and when I'm driving along, I would say that none of the landscape that I'm seeing has any reference to do with any previous period in history. Right, and the reason why we're in the now, we're in the present. So when I'm driving over the Brecon Beacons and going towards, when I go into towards Hirwaun, for example, that's bleak, that's desolate. There's sheep everywhere, and there's conifers. That used to be full of trees once. There were houses there. There were people living there. That is nothing like the landscape that was there 150 years ago, 200 years ago. And to try and get a connection with the past is so difficult. And then going back to that point of reconstructing the past, it sort of confuses things in a little bit. It really does. So what I'm going to do now is the last bit we're doing today is we're going to take a leap in time. And we're going to go to here. Now we've actually jumped thousands and thousands of years, right? We jumped thousands and thousands of years. Now, Anne, right? We're actually going to be looking at a bank barrow in the next lecture, right? So Bill's not going to hear this, and Richard ain't going to hear this. So I'm going to interpret part of the next lecture using the principles that we've been discussing and looking at for the past many months following the line. And what this is, what that snaky thing there is actually called a bank barrow. It's over 500 meters long. And that's actually at Maiden Castle. So, but before we actually go any further and we say anything about this, I need to do this. When learning flat stone walling, my tutor told me that the only reason farmers do this is because our farmland is absolutely littered with the ruins of the past, turned my world upside down. And that is a very good point. Very good point. And then that, strangely enough, leads us into this image of what we call a bank barrow. Now, I don't want to have Anne hearing me saying this twice, but bank barrows themselves were built somewhere in the region of 6,000, maybe 6,500 years ago. In when the Neolithic was really going places, very close to the time that we're actually talking about chambers, and very close to talking about henges, and very close to talking about all those megalithic things that are happening in the Neolithic period. But I found it very, very difficult on Tuesday talking about these bank barrows. And the reason why, there was one person in the group of, I think it was 8 of us on Tuesday night, maybe 7 or 8. One of the members of the group, when we sort of got to questions, he said, when we got sort of to the break, he said, well, all of what you're saying is just speculation. And it threw me a little bit, because I thought, right, okay. Then I ended up going into a diatribe why some of the things I'm saying ain't speculation, and why some of the things that I am saying are speculation, right? So I was doing a little bit of a defensive mover, because I was doing the typical archaeological thing. But you can say anything you like in these lectures, because we're following the line, we're following the sort of principle of Tim Ingold, and we're talking about the sort of that landscape, right? So these when Bill and I, and what we need to do is we need to sort of take a little leap of imagination. Now you've got that, and you see that sort of enclosure there on the right. There's probably about Bronze Age, which is probably about 3,000 years old. So the bank barrow itself is retained within the landscape, and it's retained within the landscape thousands of years later, which is a very, very important point. And then that takes us somewhere else. I don't know if you can see where I'm going to go, but that takes us somewhere else. And what we're going to do, unfortunately, we haven't got as much time as I wanted, but what we are going to do is we're going to type in, maybe what I am going to do is there, Maiden Castle. And this is a LiDAR image of Maiden Castle. And actually, if you look at the front entrance, and this is the only image I can show you that you can actually see the bank barrow today, you can see the front entrance. And if you sort of go 2/3 up and you follow a line across a field, you can see a faint line. That's actually the bank barrow, right? Now, that there, the enclosure on the right, that is the Bronze Age site. And obviously, the rest of the site extended to actually go into this sort of great site at Maiden Castle in Dorset. Now, that sort of bank there running across the field there is actually the bank barrow. Now, the one thing I'm going to say, it is very, 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 very strange concept. And I'm going to make the unusual step tonight of just keeping the recording going, but we won't have 2 separate lectures. I'll keep the recording going, so anyone's online can keep with us. There's a point. I need to come up with my point, otherwise I'm going to lose it. I need to come up with it now, right? When we follow the line and we sort of look at all the layers sort of interposed, interconnected, and we disconnect the past from being individual moments, with being moments that are enshrined within the rest of the landscape.
Mhm.
And this wording here about this is actually pretty good. Our farmland is absolutely littered with the ruins of the past. That's come from Lady Fibblesworth as well. That leads me back to this image in saying that bank itself stayed within that landscape clear up until about the 1700s, when they actually ploughed through that mound and almost destroyed it. There's a big point to be made there, that big bank barrow itself remained intact for 5,000 years or more, right? It had been there for 5,000 years, and people wanted to keep it within the landscape, which is quite strange, because it sort of fights against the idea of what Tim Ingold is saying, that everything's interconnected within the landscape, and then something remained within the landscape, become part of the landscape, was loved and seen as being something within the landscape, even if they didn't know what it was. And can you see where I'm going to go there? I'm going to link this in with the previous lecture. No, the previous topic when we looked at Tom and Muir. When we looked at Tom and Muir, we said about reconstructing the past. We said about the Roman wall. We said about reconstructing a Roman wall at Tom and Muir with the 20 odd years ago, right? And I basically said, well, we're reconstructing the past. We're making the past come alive. But in fact, they allowed that bank barrow to remain within that landscape for an incredible length of time. It was part of their landscape. Keywords, part of their landscape. It meant something to them. It was part of the ownership of their landscape. They didn't need to own it. You're now going on to the Norman mound before, can't you? We've just linked there. We've linked with the previous stuff. That bank barrow links with the previous notion. But it's abhorrent to the previous notion because it's opposed to the previous notion. Having a part of the landscape remaining within the landscape, revered and loved, and isn't demolished, is sort of loved and interpreted. Where when we're looking at places like caerwent, and when we're looking about Cardiff Castle, and we're looking about, we're linking back to Tom and Muir, people have got to make a statement on a previous landscape. When in fact they left that mound as part of the landscape without destroying it. They didn't make it, they just left it there. They just let it flow. They just let it hang out and out. And so you've got different mindsets, how people treated the past, not the word interpreted the past, treated the past, which is very, very different. How you treat the past is very different from how you interpret the past. And the Normans did it in one way. Our prehistoric ancestors did it in another way. And how we do it today is in another way again. So we've got three different perspectives there. So what we're going to do now, we've got a few more minutes and I'm going to take this off because I need to be very wary of those coming online. And so unless somebody wants to jump in here now and say something about that image as part of their questions.
Would they have put like remains in that bank barrow?
Answer the question, no, and that's part of the next lecture, so we can do that. Don't use that as that's an answer to a bank barrow question. That's not an answer to a Tim Ingold following the line question. So, right, okay. So what we're going to do, we're going to take this off now. Okay, and we're going to go. Everything is wonderful. Right, okay, so we do that there, and we go there, we go back to there, and we stop. Right, Richard's smiling for once, which is a bit of a shock. I think that's because Pauline's coming and said your dinner's ready. Oh, by the way, Richard, right, the lecture on Wednesday, right, you're gonna have a hard time with Kathy in your house because she was totally wild at Kate's. And they were laughing, they all sorts of things. Anyway, Richard, I can't hear you because your mic's off. So what I'm going to do is ask Anne anything you'd like to say, Anne, before we move on to the next part of tonight's entertainment.
No, thank you.
And I've just worked out that some of my mannerisms are very Larry Grayson.
Oh, I don't.
Shut that door. All right, okay, Bill. Anything you'd like to say, darling?
Yeah, going back to Tom and Moore, it's interesting to note that the bathhouse was well outside the fort.
Yes.
And as that would contain the water source, that would suggest there was no more hostilities in the area and it was a peaceful environment. So
oh,
I guess,
Bill,
I guess they're contemporary.
Oh, you're saying
Yeah.
you're really the love of my life when you say that. I am completely there. I love that sentiment. I love what you've just said. You are so right.
Yeah,
you are very right there, Bill. It's oh God. How do we go with that one? Oh God, what a shocker in the dark. That takes us into another line where the landscape we look at the Roman landscape as being very sort of us, very sort of it's all about us. It's all about control. When you've got nothing to challenge you, your guard is down, and you build bathhouses, and you've got vicuses, and you're part of the landscape. In other words,
Yeah.
you are now part of the landscape rather than challenging the landscape.
Yeah. So the old the Pax
Mm.
Romana was probably in place at that time, if
Yes.
if it's contemporary. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Actually, you've just come across something else that we can do: challenging the landscape. Oh my God, you're really giving me material for another book. Right? Okay. So, anything you'd like to say, Richard?
No, I'm all okay on everything.
You're all outed and outed.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Shut that door. Right. Okay.
Shut that door.
Shut that door, and don't mention Everard either. Don't mention him. Okay, so if there's no other questions, Bill and Anne, it was good that we started a little bit earlier today. I think what we will do is keep that up for next week. You know, it doesn't have to be at 1:45. You could come in. You could come in a few minutes after that, but as long as we start before 7, that was really helpful. So that's good. It's not rocket science. Okay then, Bill, if you've got nothing else to say, and Richard, you've got nothing else to say, I will see you. I will see you, Bill, next week. And Richard, I do apologise in advance for why Kathy's coming to your house.
Good old Kathy. Give my regards.
Yeah. So it's all good. So,
Why are they going to your house? Oh, face to
because
face.
what
isn't
it is, I'm not traveling to Barry for a few weeks because I got to put a
Oh,
roof
yeah,
on.
yeah.
I got to get the roof sorted for the house.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's all good. That's all good. Right. So what I'm going to do, Richard, what I'm going to say, Richard, we're going to go on to our next lecture in a few moments. We're going to keep this online for everybody online. Stay there. Don't forget to like and subscribe. So Richard and Bill, I will see you next week.
Cheers, then, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Cheers, Billy. Cheers, Rich. Oh, he just went. He just suddenly just dived off there. And apparently somebody's put a message on your freedom for the Iranian people. Oh well, freedom for the
That's a
us
woman.
people in Cymru as well, because we've been enslaved by the English since 1536, my lovelies.
Who's gonna? Oh, Jeff is here. Is it
Jeff?
only Jeff?
No, it's Goff.
Is it only Goff?
It's only Goff. Well, Henry's
Me and
away.
Goff. Me and Goff.
Goff.
Hello.
If you leave.
Hello.
Apparently,
Oh.
Goff, we got to say this: freedom for the Russian people. We have to put that in there.
Well, yeah, of course.
It's all about love. It's all about love, you know, these days.
Yeah,
Right.
it always has been with you.
Yeah, the thing is, right? You know, I want to make love and not war. That's the way it should be.
Yeah.
Look, Carl.
What?
I'm looking at this. Oh, it's backwards. It's
Oh,
Tumbarton.
and you're supposed to show us an image in the earlier thing. Show us the image now.
Oh, that was just a map.
Well, go and show it. Well, you're going to show us something. Go and show us whatever you want to show.
It's got all the castles and, you know, all in relationship to Tumbarton, because it's all 10 miles from Tumbarton to Cardiff, 10 miles to caerwent, and then there's all these little churches as well. But this.
And can you get me a copy of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I can send it. Yeah, I can download it. I'm
Well,
sure
I've
it's on Wikipedia or something, or it might be off Google Student Scholar.
Right, okay, I've got to give some loving apologies. Kathy gives her apologies tonight. Dell gives her apologies tonight, and also who else have we got? Henry gives his apologies tonight. and Jane as well. So we got loads of
Oh,
apologies.
Henry.
I said Henry, didn't I? So what we're gonna do, right? I'm just gonna pour a drink. Paul. Who the hell's Paul?
I think
Okay,
I've got
right.
to have a cup of coffee.
All right, go and have a cup of coffee, love. Don't mind us, don't worry. You know, Goffer's been looking forward to this.
Oh no, you better carry on, and I'll just nip out.
Should we talk about the results from the American election?
The American election?
Yeah, it's really relevant to what we're doing.
No, it's not.
Yeah, I just thought I'd wind you up. What I'm gonna do, right? I'm gonna put the fire on, right?
The
I'm gonna
world's
pour the
gone
drink.
mad.
What?
The world's gone mad.
Look, I'm not gonna give away Goff's secret, but he's a big fan of Donald Trump, all right?
The Donald.
The Donald. By the way, one of our Barry people, right? Another Kathy, right? She's a massive fan of Donald Trump.
I'll go and make a coffee.
What the hell? I thought we were gonna get started. All right, go and get a coffee. Don't worry, Goff. You can't get the staff anymore.
Oh, I saw your girlfriend today. She was asking after you.
Which one?
Which
Oh, Big Bertha. How is she doing these days?
one? Liz, yes. I was in the storeroom with her.
Oh, I tell you what, Goff. I've got a confession. I went in the storeroom with her once. Do you know what? She asked me to go upstairs with her to get a tire. And the problem was, it wasn't to get a tire at all.
Oh. Anyway, she sends the best wishes to you.
You know, I can even do better than that. Send her my love.
I wanted to know where you were because I haven't seen you for so long. I had to tell her you're incognito.
Yeah, I'm incognito with Jim.
Yes. Jim.
Oh, do you know what? Right, I gotta say, I'm still bombarded with messages off Jim saying, "Oh, give Jessica a job back. You should have paid Jessica more money. I'm getting all this crap." And I've been trying to. I blocked him on YouTube. I blocked him on Facebook. He's coming through on my other stuff now. It's just really sad.
You should take out some sort of legal thing, harassment order or something.
Yeah, I've got to be honest with you. I just feel sorry for the guy. I really do.
Well, I don't. I think he's a twat.
Well, I know he is, but you know. Anyway, I gotta crack on. And
Yeah.
when Anna's got a bloody finger out or whatever she's got a finger in, we can get started.
Oh,
Oh God, my God. Should have known better. I wish you'd understand.
there's this big renewed discussion about the Elgin marbles.
Oh, come on, let's have a bit of controversy. Let's talk about the Elgin marbles for a minute. Go on, what?
I saw there was a thing on the radio about it, about, you know.
Hang on. Can you
It was on Politics Live, actually.
can you rephrase that? You saw a thing on the radio, but that's not the point, is it?
No, on Politics Live on the telly, and it was the Tory MP said we should keep them because how far back do you want to go? There'd be no museums left in the world with any exhibits if we handed them back to people.
Yeah, he's got a good point, and there is another point. Is then when we start handing stuff back, are they going to hand stuff back to us? Anyway, I did a postgraduate diploma on this. This was one of the modules about handing artifacts back to countries. Anyway, the British government would argue that you know, places like the Smithsonian, places like the Pergamon, places like the Louvre, places like you know, the British Museum, are places that you can go to where you can see bits of all the world history. So in other words, you don't have to go to Iraq to see a bit of Iraqi history. You could go to You could go to Paris. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a question that has to be had, isn't it?
Do you know the biggest problem is the other thing as well is, as we've seen with Syria, right? If all the artifacts from Syria had remained in Syria, half of them would have been completely destroyed by ISIS.
Yes.
And look at Libya, right? The wealth of history and archaeology in Libya has been completely looted and destroyed, right? Well, it's good that we've got stuff from Libya and other countries. When there was the Arab Spring in 2011, 2012, there was looting of museums. Well, the thing is, right? If you know, we've got stuff in other countries, and it means that at least we've got something in all these other places. Yeah, the other thing as well is the Elgin marbles. What we've got to do, we've got to work with these countries. We've got to make replicas. We've got to make sure that they've got copies of their past, you know, and equally the other way around.
Well, I think if they want them back and we pinched them, if we took them and not paid for them, I think they should have them back.
Technically, we did pay for the Elgin marbles.
Well, it's not just the Elgin marbles. They had a Scottish SNP on that programme. And he said, well, we want the chessmen back. You know, what are they called?
Yeah. Oh God.
You know what?
The Island Lewis chess figures, yeah.
Yeah, he said, we want them back. So, you know, where, you know, can't we come to some arrangement?
Yeah, where do you stop? You know, there is actually the Lewis figures. That's it. The Lewis figures. There are some of them in the I think it's the Edinburgh Museum. They have got some of them in there.
Well, I think is it Glasgow or Edinburgh Museum have sent back some of the artifacts, haven't they, to Greece? I think they've already done that.
Yeah, some of the other thing is the other argument is with this Goff is that, for example, if you go to Swansea Museum, they've got bloody they've got mummies and all sorts of things. When in fact most of the stuff found on the Gow has never been put on display because they haven't got space to display it. So our own history is not displayed because we're displaying everybody else's.
Fair comment. Fair comment.
That is a fair comment. It is. Anyway, so what I'm going to say is that if all the stuff from the British Museum was sent to all these other countries in the world, we'd still be able to fill the British Museum with all our own stuff.
That's right.
Yeah.
And pictures of Lloyd George.
Yeah, well, hang on a minute. You know, keep my relative out of this discussion, right? I've got to keep the fact that I'm related to Lloyd George very, very private and within myself.
Yes.
I'm gonna be back now. 1 second.
Have you heard of a book called Measurements of the Gods?
No.
Or Deluge from Genesis to Atlantis?
All right. No, I never heard of it.
It's on, I found this information on, I think it might have been Wikipedia or it might be Google Scholar. I'm not sure. It's about Tumbalum and there's so much on there.
All right.
And this part is just Tumbalum and associated environs. Part 3, Normans, castles and churches. So that's what it's all about, you know. And I didn't realise that there was a Norman motte on Tumbalum, apart from an Iron Age hill fort and whatever else they decided to do with it afterwards.
Well, I'm very ignorant about what's archaeologically around me, because I was never taught it in school. So that's why I see Karl to get the information from him.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I did. I mean, I was born in Newport, so Dumbarton was just,
Oh, really?
you know,
Oh,
on the hill. You see it as you come into Wales.
yes, there's so much we've got here. I don't know. I've been enlightened many times by Carl.
Have you ever been on any of his walks?
No, I couldn't handle it.
Pardon?
I can't handle him.
Oh,
An hour or two is enough.
oh no, you've got to go in a group. You can't have him on your own. It's just, oh God, you'd never get away.
Him or someone like that. God. No, thanks.
But I've been on a lot of walks with him years ago.
Yes, well, yes, I have
Very
done.
enjoyable, but of course it's changed so much, you know.
Yeah, actually, it's not Carl. This is a new Carl. There's a doppelganger.
No, he is very different. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I did a ghost walk with him in San Mouse.
Oh, right. Yeah, actually, you're silent, Carl. Carl, you're silent.
The first time I met Goff, and it was Dennis, wonderful Dennis, was actually on a ghost walk.
Yeah.
And the two of them said, "Oh, they want to come along to an archaeology class." So I haven't been able to. I haven't been able to get rid of Dennis because he's still floating around me somewhere, and I haven't been able to get rid of Goff.
Oh, that's what we're all like. We can't get rid of any of us.
Do you know the weird thing is I still speak to Dennis.
Yeah.
I don't know what it
so
is.
quiet.
The thing is, when I speak to Dennis, right, it's like one of those things. He used to have, he used to do something for you. He used to buy you a drink, right? He used to come on a ghost walk. He used to buy you a drink, right? And every single ghost walk he said he would going to buy me a drink, and 90% of the time I said no. So it got to the stage he owed me 15 pints, right? Anyway, he bought me this drink this one time. I said, "All right, Dennis, you still owe me another 15." I said, and you'd say thank you, and he said, "Oh, don't mention it." And I'd say, "Yeah, I've got to mention it, and I really appreciate it." He said, "Oh, it's okay." He was such a really nice bloke, you know. So anyway, so what I'm going to do now is Bank Barrows. Right, and you're not going to do your news. You've already done your news. Any news from you, Goff?
No, I haven't. No, I just caught something on the radio about somebody finding some statues in muddy water somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
Is that the same as catching a dose?
Well,
No. Actually, it was in Italy. It was Etruscan.
that's
Etruscan, they found a well, you know. They
Yes.
found a holy, well, you know, like a spring. And there's all these bronzes being thrown in there, as you know.
So
There's loads
Wow!
biggest
Etruscan, yeah.
It was the biggest cache of Etruscan finds ever anywhere on the planet.
Yeah. I think so.
You know, have you ever heard that somebody make a statement, right? It's like, we've got the finest broths anywhere in the world. And then somebody said, well, they've only got them in bloody Orkney and Northern Scotland. Yeah, but they're still the finest in the world.
Yes.
But,
did you hear about the Etruscan find I was on about just now? About the
no, I have not. I've not come across that. I was listening to you talking about. I've not actually come across that at all.
Supposed to be quite impressive.
It was on the news. It was on the news.
Right.
It was on the news, wasn't it?
I just caught a bit of it. I was doing something else.
ITV.
Well, I think I might have been ITV. I know I don't watch ITV.
He doesn't watch ITV. He watches BBC,
You only
the
watch
brainwashing organisation.
I don't watch ITV because it's carcinogenic.
And stop playing with your breasts.
The news. It was, well, we only watch ITV news at tea time, but lunchtime we watch BBC News. So it could have been BBC News.
Well,
Guys!
I heard it on the radio actually because I listen to a lot of radio. So
I saw it on the radio earlier on.
I went I went to a Etruscan village, you know. I mean, gosh, it was wonderful. That's
Oh.
where all my photos, I got photos of.
We haven't done much of it about the Etruscans with Carl. I know that.
Do you know what? I'm gonna tell. Oh, we've gone off on a complete
Are we
tangent. But
doing? What are we
what I
doing
am
today?
what I am gonna, Anne, I can't get a bloody word in edgeways with you. Just like a bloody talking shop. It's like a knocking shop on the move. Right. Anyway, what I was
Carl.
gonna do. Listen, what I was gonna do. When just before the pandemic came, I was going to be doing I was going to be doing my live entertainment things, right? And I was going to have a stage show and whatever. Anyway, I went back on teaching the stuff online and whatever, and now I got to the stage. Maybe next year I can do that again, right? But one of the things I was going to do is I had somebody who had taken some photographs of Etruscan art and some Etruscan tombs, right? And I had them on my computer, and I thought, oh, that's going to be one of my first presentations. Well, it was going to be like a double. It was going to be like an hour lecture. It's going to be some entertainment in the middle and whatever. And it was going to. I had booked the hall in Chepstow, and then we were going to be doing something really, really controversial. One of the lectures was actually going to be about the Etruscans.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
I mean,
look forward to you doing that eventually.
Yeah, it's going to be eventually, because obviously the world has completely changed. So, right, okay. So now tonight we're going to be looking at bank barrows, right? Not Lloyd's and Barclays bank barrows. They're bank barrows, bank barrows. So that's what we're going to be doing tonight.
That sounds sort of topical.
Yeah. So there's somebody online giving off a load of the stick about watching the BBC, but that's life. They said, don't watch TV, British brainwashing cartel.
Maybe has a point.
Yeah, he has got a point. He has got a point. Do you know what, right? I was up this morning at 4 o'clock, right? And who comes on the radio as a DJ at 4 o'clock in the morning is Billy Piper, right? And she sounded completely different from when she used to do the old entertainment stuff. Good old Billy Piper. Right, okay then. So one of the things I wanted to do today is bank barrows, right? But I started off with showing this map of prehistoric Britain, which is actually going to come up now. It's not very clear, but what? Oh yeah, it is very clear now, right? And what we did last week, we looked at the wonderful mine at Langdale. And when I say mine, a wonderful quarry, the Neolithic quarry in Cumbria at Langdale, right? And what we did, we mentioned other sites. And last week was our sort of first true sort of Neolithic lecture that we've done, right? So this week is one of those ilk of Neolithic lectures. Now, the reason why I'm showing this is to sort of cut into this sort of idea of how Britain looked, what was going on in Britain in the prehistoric period, and it's very, very difficult to try and fit anything down into any form or any kind of order. And what we mean by that is there's a lot going on in the Neolithic period in Britain. And basically it's showing, which is I might go with what we've got is all these sort of grey areas indicate where we've got lots of Neolithic activity going on. But in reality, Neolithic activity is going on in lots and lots of places. So what I've got to do is be very careful that I try to keep away from the lecture that I did earlier on and that sort of following the line stuff. But one thing that we do know about the Neolithic period is simply if there's dense trees in the way, right? And you know, we don't find any evidence until the Bronze Age. That means that those trees weren't cleared in the Neolithic period, and therefore there were trees there in the Neolithic period. That's basically the formula. But what you can see by looking at something like this, particularly along the river margins, to Thames and the Wye, for example, that lots of areas of trees have either been felled or they've come down naturally, or all those different processes that we saw trees coming down in the Mesolithic period. So there's a lot of activity going on. So one of the things I wanted to do was something very, very obscure, that being those sites known as bank barrows. They're quite mysterious. They're sort of very, very odd, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to basically type in the word bank barrow. I've actually got I've got my images actually there, but I'm just going to type in for you. There we go. The first two that comes up is Maiden Castle, and the other there's one's bank barrow in the furnace, for example. And if we type in sort of bank barrow there, and we just simply go, right, it comes up with this other one straight away, right? Now this is quite a famous one. Oh, well, we're straight onto we're straight onto Wikipedia, which I don't want to be. So that's Broadmain Bank Barrow, right? Broadmain Bank Barrow is a very, very interesting site. There you go. Long low bank barrow, right? But they are very different from long barrows, because that's West Kennet long barrow. They're nothing like West Kennet long barrow.
Are they anything like you know, those enclosed, what are they called? Closures.
Oh, right. You're talking about cursus monuments, and you're talking about
causewayed enclosures.
No, they're nothing to do with that. Right, they're nothing to do with that.
That looks
So,
like a cursus monument.
but this itself is a long barrow. It's got a burial chamber, or a chamber that turned out into a burial chamber, right? This is not a bank barrow. So what I did on Tuesday, right, to avert people talking about different types of archaeological sites, and trying to say, is it like this and is it like that, which you've just done, Anne, right? What I want to do is give you a few perspectives on where these monuments turn up in the Neolithic period. It's going to be a bit sort of loose, right? But that's what we're going to do. So if we just go there, and we just go guest there, right? And there we go, and we go share, and you're going to have the whiteboard. There we go. We're going to get drawing on the whiteboard, right? So there we go. So when we talk about dates for the Neolithic period, it's changing all the time. So when we start to get sort of what are the hallmarks of the Neolithic period? I know we said this last week, but this is a little bit of a recap. What makes the Mesolithic, which is over here, which ends approximately 8,000 years ago, and then our Neolithic period ends approximately 4,500 years ago. What's the difference between the Mesolithic and the Neolithic, right? And the other thing as well is, when you think about it, that period of 8,000 to 4,500 years ago is a period of 3,500 years, right? Which is an incredible length of time. So what we need to say is that they did things in a big way in the Neolithic period. They built things, lots of these monuments like Stonehenge are called megalithic monuments, megaliths. They built megaliths, right? That's what makes the Neolithic period very different from the Mesolithic period. We don't have big monuments in the Mesolithic period. We have settlements in the Neolithic period, and we have settlements in the Mesolithic period. That's similar. We had a little bit of agriculture in the Mesolithic period, but we've got a lot of agriculture in the Neolithic period, a lot of agriculture, a lot of agri in the Neolithic period. Bit of agriculture in the Mesolithic, a lot of agriculture in the Neolithic period. So those two things, building in a big way in stone and in soil, bank barrows, but soil, henges, megaliths, Avebury, Newgrange, megalith stones. So what I want to do is explain a little bit more about this. And we do have 5 people watching online. Thank you very much. And what we're going to do here, and there's just a point being made here about paths and so on. One thing that I would say is that still primarily people are moving things around by water, right? And usually in the Roman period, people are using things around by water, but there are little trackways here and there, which will come up in another lecture in the near future. So what we're going to do, we're going to get rid of this now. We're going to get rid of this. Do. Oh, do you know what? I could almost be like Rolf Harris, couldn't I, drawing these things on the board? So here we go. Have you guessed what it is yet? So basically, in the early part of the Neolithic period, so going back 5,000 years ago, what we are going to say, and what we could say, and what we're going to say is some of the earliest monuments in the Neolithic period were what we would call bank barrows, right? And then we've got causewayed enclosures. Now, causewayed enclosures, right? Causewayed enclosure. So bank barrows, let's give you a bit of a description. A bank barrow can be a long mound that goes for approximately 100 meters, 200 meters, 500 meters, right? And there's basically nothing in it. And there's usually a ditch around the whole thing. It's just a bank with a ditch around the whole thing, right? And then somewhere what they're doing around the sort of as bank barrows and causeways sort of fall out of use. So we're probably talking about 6,000 years ago, or somewhere like that, into the 5,000, but roughly about 6,000 years ago. What we are sort of starting to talk about is these other monuments, which we'll give more dates to when we actually come to them, such as the avenue. The avenues and alleyways. No, it's not that. The avenues, as in the stone avenue at Avebury, and we've then got the cursus monuments, which a cursus monument is a very, very strange monument indeed. And what a cursus monument is, cursus monument. The cursus monuments themselves, very interesting things. Anne mentioned a cursus monument earlier on. They say cursus monument is a flat zone surrounded by 2 parallel banks that turn in on themselves. So it's sort of so it's basically a bank that is around a space in the middle with sometimes a ditch on the outside. That's a cursus monument. That could go on for 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers, and so on. So that's what then happens. And then we have a huge revolution. Sometime in the 5,000, 5,500, roughly going up to 6,000. What we've then got is we've got these things called henge monuments. And what a henge monument is, and again, we're just doing a little bit of an introduction. So if you don't remember any of these, we'll be doing them anyway. So henge monuments themselves is basically where you've got the causewayed enclosures. And I am explaining what a causewayed enclosure is. A causewayed enclosure is basically a concentric circle, and the concentric circle is made up of a ditch, a space, which is a causeway, ditch, space, causeway. So you go all the way around, right? So the space in the middle is flat, the space on the outside is flat, but there's that string of sausages, as we call it, a ditch, causeway, ditch, causeway, to create a string of sausages. And then what happens is, in this wonderful period of, as the Neolithic starts to develop and go on, we got the henge monuments. So what we got, these big huge ditches and banks, like the one we see at Avebury, and also Stonehenge had a henge monument as well. Lots of other places had henge monuments, right? They get rid of the causeways and they make it one big ditch, and they create a bank there with a couple of entrances in and out. That's basically henge monument. And then what we're starting to see developing by about 5,000 years ago is we're starting to see long barrows, right? We're starting to see long barrows, like West Kennet Long Barrow, like Tinkinswood Burial Chamber, like St. Lythers Burial Chambers, long barrows, lots of them in the country, long barrows. And then you start to see, usually inside the old henges, you actually see stone circles. Stone circles. So there we go. We've got lots of stone circles. In and amongst all this is like loads of settlements and stuff. You know, everything's happening. I got to tell you about that as well. Oh God, I got so much I want to tell you. So basically, long barrows. You've got stone circle monuments, naturally stone monuments, and you've got wood henges as well. So where there's an absence of stone, you've got wood henges, which is basically a wooden circle, a concentric wooden circle with posts instead of stones. Sometimes they came before stone circles. Other times, wood henges and stone circles existed actually at the same time. And also, you've got all the basic chambers that you see across the country. Some have got long barrows associated with them. Other chambers have got capstones. Other chambers don't have capstones. All these other things associated with this new period as we go into the Neolithic. And then what we then start to see is everything starts to really, really develop. And sometime around this time as well, probably maybe as far back as 6,000 years ago, another monument we missed out is Silbury Hill, Marlborough Mound, and other locations where you've got these big sort of conical shaped mounds. So there's a lot going on, different things going on at different times. Some of them overlap, like sort of different parts of humanity and the distant past have overlapped and all the rest of it. Lots of these start to overlap as well. Oh my God. There is something else that I would like to mention. So I'm going to take a little bit of a slurp. Anyone want to jump in and say something now? They can, but I'm going to take a little slurp.
Are you going to show us some pictures?
I am going to show you some pictures. Shut up, you silly woman. But what I got to do is give you a little bit of a list. You are still seeing this thing on this. You are still seeing the board, aren't you?
Yes.
We're still seeing the board.
Yeah,
Right.
well, hang on a minute. We got
board.
Anne, I know my artwork isn't up to your standard, right? But shut up. Right. So the way I describe the Neolithic period, I describe it in zones, right? So you've got it in the Neolithic period, you've got the forbidden zone. Forbidden. That's Biden, isn't it? Oh, never mind. That's supposed to be a D. Forbidden. There's an E there as well, isn't there? Right. So forbidden zone, and then what we've got. I'm having to do this with my finger. It's not good. And number 2 is your living zone, your Lebensraum, if you want to talk in a German sense, your living area and your farming area. Number 3, you've got the area of the ancestors. And you've got number 4, the area of the dead. So basically, what the forbidden zone is basically those primeval forests, primeval woodlands. The forbidden zones are those places that our ancestors would stay away from. There's no evidence that they went to them. You know, that type of thing. You know, we got that areas of, as I said at the beginning, areas of the Neolithic people. There are places that we've got no evidence that people in the Neolithic period ever went there. That's basically what it is. You got the living places, the labourers' realm, the farming landscape, and all the rest of it. So you've got some good evidence of this living places and farming in places like Orkney, which has got quite a really good intact landscape. So that's what we're looking at. So you've got places like Barnhouse near the Nessa Brodga. You've got the Nessa Brodga site itself. You've actually got, and then you can start speaking about places like Skara Brae, which is also on Orkney. So you've got these different places that the living and the farming landscape. You've got evidence that what they're doing, they're moving those boulders from the areas that they cleared as woodlands. So that's evidence of farming. You've got evidence of what could be described as early ridge and furrow landscapes. You get a little bit of that in the upland area still surviving from the Neolithic period. That's that. The ancestors, the monuments that we see associated with your ancestors are your bank barrows, your souterrains, which is another type of monument that we'll be mentioning in the future. The souterrain, which is an underground chamber. So you've got a bit of a souterrain. So you've got the avenues and the cursus monuments, and that's the landscape of the ancestors. Landscape of the dead, Now that's a really interesting one. Is the landscape of the dead, is that the same as Stonehenge? Is that the same as Avebury? Obviously, landscape of the dead, where you've got causewayed enclosure monuments, you've got your long barrows eventually, and you've got all the other things that comes into your landscape of the dead. Bingo. And now we are going to see some images. So there we go, Anne. Because I know I'm going to get a complaint off Goff in a minute, say he's not seeing many images, and he's not really seeing me. Goff, like, the only reason why Goff does these lectures is he likes looking at me, so he could tell Liz what I look like. Right. Yeah. What Goff secretly does, he takes photographs every now and again. And he shows them to Liz.
What a twisted mind you've got.
What's that?
What a twisted mind you've got.
Yes, it is.
I got a really twisted mind, twisted fire starter. Do. Right, okay. This is the Broadmain Bank Barrow, right? And what it is, very interestingly, the Broadmain Bank Barrow in Dorset. We will mention that, and we'll talk about a little bit about these barrows. What's twisted about saying that people take photographs of me? They do.
Yeah, the police.
You know what I'm going to do? You've just got me going off a tangent, right? When somebody mucked with the brakes in my car this one day, right? It was just 2018. You know all about this, Goff. But anyway, the long story short is that I had made an accusation publicly of who actually cut the brakes, and the police were looking into it. I was at a petrol station after my class in Bridgendis one day, and this police officer comes up to me, and he says, "Oh, hello, Carl. How are you today?" And I thought, right. He said, I put your photograph into the cam, and we identified you straight away. And he said, I've been looking for you. He said, you've got to take the guy's name off the internet because it's affecting our investigations. And the guy's getting really upset that you've named him. Anyway, the point is, see, I'm known to the police. There you go. Anyway, see, I had to put that in there. Sorry, I've gone off on a complete tangent. Right, life. La 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 la. Right, okay. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to mention a little bit about this bank barrow. This is the Broadmain Bank Barrow, and what it tells us about the Broadmain Bank Barrow is as follows. And there's a lot of gen here. Well, when I say a lot of gen, there's a nice little bit of gen, and we'll talk about bank barrows generally, and then we'll look at the one at Maiden Castle. So here we go. Lots of these bank barrows are protected. They're scheduled ancient monuments. This is the Broadmain Bank Barrow. Rather interesting. And this itself is not just a bank barrow on its own. It's got later monuments associated with it. Those two cake-like things are actually Bronze Age barrows. So basically, the point is these bank barrows remain as part of the Neolithic landscape into the Bronze Age landscape and beyond into the Iron Age landscape, as we will mention, as Anne already knows, associated with the bank barrow at Maiden Castle. So the Broadmain Bank Barrow forms not just its own monument, but it's inspired other people to actually build there. And it's in West Dorset. The bank barrow on which we're looking at today has been extensively researched, and these monuments. There's not many of them in the country. We probably know of up to maybe 20, and that's it. And they're mainly. Most of these bank barrows are in Dorset and that area. There are one or two dotted around the rest of the country, right? But that's our bank barrows. They're mainly in one area. It's probably because they were in response to where everybody else is actually using stone for things. They're just using earth, a bank with a ditch around it. Wow. So English Heritage say about this monument, they're protected and they're scheduled for the better understanding of the nature of the specific monument and the other thing as well is because there's other monuments around, And with the other lectures that we do just before this, Tim Ingold was saying it's naturally part of the living, breathing landscape, and nothing's changed. And it's remained there intact. They've not quarried it away. They've not destroyed it. It's loved, and it's still there. So what we do see is that this is a very impressive, very important monument. And you know, I've got so much information here about this monument, which is actually coming up on my screen. It's an English heritage document. Goff, had you ever come across these very strange monuments up until I mentioned them today?
Well, barrows, yes, but not these what do you call them? Long barrows? No,
there's not a long barrow. It's a bank barrow.
Bank barrows, yeah. I know about loads in Wales, aren't there? Barrows, you know.
Yeah,
but this
But
go on.
not
well,
these.
the only thing I was going to ask was like with a long barrow, you've got, well, I mean, it's an earthwork, isn't it? It's an
with stone.
with
A long
barrow.
barrow. Basically, you've got a stone chamber and there's a load of earth going up to it. That's a long barrow.
Yeah.
So a bank barrow hasn't got a chamber.
No chamber. No. That's
So
why
just-
I can't understand what they did with the, why they didn't. I wonder if they had cremations. I don't know.
No, we've got no evidence of them either. And I'm going to
No.
give you my take on what these monuments are like.
Yeah.
But anyway, this is part of a ridgeway. So it's 142 meters above sea level, right? It sort of commands the landscape. It looks over the landscape, so it's got quite a nice view of the landscape. So it's overlooking the South Dorset Ridgeway. So there we go. That's basically where it is within a chalk landy landscape. So it's quite an important monument. And and it's been recorded on maps. Initially, it was recorded on the maps as a dike. And when you've got the old maps from the 1890s, sort of referring to it as a dike, it's all people immediately think it's a defensive dike. Well, if you've got something that is only a few hundred meters long, 250 meters long, it's hardly going to be defensive.
No.
So chunks of it are now eroded away. They're not exactly clear, but you've got a big chunk of it which is actually still fairly clear. And there's been a lot of damage caused to it over the years. And these types of bank barrows, as we will say, were first identified in the 1930s as a specific site as a bank barrow. They've been known as a bank barrow since then. Very few of them have been excavated. The one at Maiden Castle, which we will mention, that has been interpreted. And sort of there's been a little bit of excavation on it, which is really, really interesting. The other thing as well is bank barrows come before anything else on the landscape that is monumental. It's before those barrows. It's before anything else on the landscape. It's the first part of the sequence on the landscape. After the trees have been cleared, after whoever did whatever they were doing with the landscape, this is the thing that was there, right? And we know it was constructed probably around 6,000 years ago, right? And they're not necessarily sort of in one direction or another direction, south, east, west, and all the bloody rest of it. But it is 250 meters in length, and bits of it are up to nearly 2 meters in height still from the surrounding landscape. It would have had a ditch around it, and the ditch has naturally been lost. But the overall width of it is actually about 14 meters. So it's quite a chunky undertaking. It's quite a chunky feat. It's basically, there are bits of damage with it over the years, but that's to be expected. The ditch itself, there are only little bits of the ditch that actually survive on the southern side of it, but we know there was a ditch around all of it. And it may have been a U-shaped ditch. So it's, it's a scooped out ditch out of the chalk, which is rather interesting. Rather V-shaped ditch. It's a U-shaped ditch, which is rather interesting. And there has been lots of damage caused to it. But what I'm going to say now is, before we say any more about bank barrows, and we talk generally about bank barrows and the one at Maiden Castle, we need to look at another image. And this is what we're going to do. There is looking down, and you can see the other monuments on the landscape, but we don't need them for now, right? And that's basically the map from the 1890s. You can see basically where it's got only a bit of the dike. It's marked as a dike there, right? And this is the trying to get the right interpretation of what a monument is very, very important, because they could have just said, oh, it's a defensive dike, you know, it's to stop the Anglo-Saxons from sort of, you know, if you put it didn't make any sense, right? It's only 250 meters in length at maximum, so you just go around the side. It's not a dike, right? It's something very, very different, right? So if we sort of go back and have another little look at the image, and there's lots of little. If we take that one, actually this would, we're going to go for that one on the left or that one on the right. Let's just go for that one. Right, okay. That gives you a perspective of the bank barrow. Right, and hang on a minute. Hang on, just go with this one. Right, okay, there it is. You're actually on it. Right, and a little bit of an indication of a little bit of a bank on the left, which actually carries a ditch, right? Which there would have been a ditch around all of it. That's why I got away from that image. So this is the bank barrow there. You're actually looking down. You're looking down it, right? And you've got a clump of trees in the distance. Fine, right? So Tuesday was very awkward because usually when I do these lectures, I'm usually able to manage everybody and try to keep everybody into it. And when we went to ask for questions, the person I asked first on Tuesday, he said, "Well, you know, lots of this is speculation. You know, what is?" And that was it. And then I said, how do I agree or disagree with him? Before I could say any more, somebody said it was built for a reason, right? So what we need to do, we need to go to a tick list. What the hell are these things? What are these things about? So if I get a little bit of a pen, and let's just try and go back through this. So the facts of this monument are as follows. So instead of you thinking I'm going to go off on another planet, right? Let's just try and understand what's going on. So first things first, there was a flat landscape that was dominated with a ridge. So they decided to build this monument on the ridge. That's fact one. So maybe one of you could write this down. Fact number one, because I'm not. Right. So there's obviously a reason, right? Or does there need to be a reason for this monument? You know, does there need to be a reason for everything in history? As we're starting to come to see, no, there doesn't. Right. As I made that analogy last week, and I keep moving it, I keep making it. You know, that island, that stone being moved across the Pacific Island. Long story short, an archaeologist witnesses a stone being moved over a mile. And when he turns around, the group is gone, and it's moved by two boys, and eventually the last bit is moved by one boy, and the stone is left on the ground. And the archaeologist later says, "Well, that was a bit disappointing." And the people turned on him and said, "Yeah, but you don't need to have a reason for moving the stone. They moved the stone, and that's the reason." And the archaeologist then realized that, you know, creating something is the reason behind it. Now that's a really good thing. So we can agree that there's a reason, but not necessarily the reason in our point of view. It's within a landscape. You could actually cultivate it there. You could have actually planted stuff, right? So, you know, it's taken up space. It's taken up part of the landscape. This is a thing that you'll see with the Neolithic world. The Neolithic world is dominated by a landscape that was once agricultural. The trees have been removed, the boulders have been removed, and then suddenly bloody people start building these types of things, right? But the difference is with this type of thing, it remained on the landscape. It still remains within the landscape for a very, very long time, right? So then we've got to use the words of reward and value, and we've got to then come to the word achievement. They achieved making and creating this mound, right? Creating and making this mound. So in other words, what we're saying is that these people did this. It's there. And there's no artifacts in it at all. Now, what? There's no artifacts in the mound. What? Oh, hang on a minute. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. There's no artifacts in the mound, right? As Goff said, I've got a bit really twisted mind, right? Really weird mind, right? But I'm gonna tell you something, right? I've always dreamt of having a room with nothing in it, right? With having no paintings on the wall, just a carpet on the floor, right? Just a room with nothing in it, right? And the first thing that somebody would say, what are you going to do with this room? Why do you put a paint on the wall? Why do you put a gas fire over the corner? Why do you do this? Why do you do that? Why do you put a table? Why do you put a chair? Right. No, I want an empty room. That's what I want. I want an empty room. Yeah, but you can't just build an empty room. I can bloody build an empty room. I've achieved an empty room. I can build an empty room if I want to, right? So when I put that perspective into this, right? When I maybe think about this, and you can think, well, what's going on here? The actual idea of creating it is good enough. Now, I did say to you earlier on, this actually comes into the landscape of the ancestors. So it has got a purpose. And I need to explain something that really is important to me, right? Now, we will do this type of monument in the future called souterrains. We find souterrains on the island of Orkney. And what they are, they're little steps going into a little chamber underground, and there's a little passage underground, and it goes to another little chamber, and the walls are lined with stone, right? And in some of them, you see a bit of stone, and there's a hole in the stonework. They haven't put anything there. A bit of stone, hole in the stonework, bit of stone, hole in the stonework, bit of stone, hole in the stonework. You get the idea, right? And another archaeologist went down with me this one day, called Martin Carruthers, University of Highlands and Islands. And he went down there. He said that hole itself is for shouting into the hole, right, or communicating with the ancestors. There's a space there for a reason. We found nothing in them. It's meant to be empty because they need to sort of vent their anger, or they need to communicate with the ancestors. Good point. Where is he getting that from? So moving on from that, if I get my little scribbly board on, I can sort of show you what I believe these monuments are about. And then we can have a little bit of a discussion. Then I'll tell you a little bit more about these bank barrows. Then I'll tell you the one about Maiden Castle, and we'll call it a day. I don't know if we're going to be able to. I don't know if we're going to be going on until 8:30 or whatever. But we've had a certainly good lecture. But anyway, I'll bring your thoughts in, both of you, and anybody who's online, if they would like to make a contribution. There's more of them online than there is now. So if we go with this now, and we go back to that, and we go there. Let's get my drawing board on. There we go, drawing board. La, 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 la. Right, okay. So if you think about this, and we're just going to do a sort of, we've got a little bit of a rounded ditch. It goes something like that. We've got a bit of a ditch there as well. And there's the surrounding road surface, not road surface, ground surface, right? It looks a bit strange, but that's the way I've drawn it, right? So now you've got a ditch around it, you've got a bank. That's all there is. Why have you got a ditch around it? Now, usually when you've got ditches around things, is to sort of stop you going on the bank. But there's nothing on the bank. There is something on the bank. It's part of the ancestors. That's where your ancestors go. I'm saying this, right? You can believe this or not, but you'll see, right? Somebody said to me at the end of the lecture on Tuesday, they said, Karl, I can disagree with everything you said today, but I can't, because every single archaeologist talks about the land of the ancestors. Even Neil Oliver, land of the ancestors. So the point is, Mike Parker Pearson, land of the ancestors. We all do, right? So why do you have to have the ditch? You don't really need the ditch. You could just build it with turf from the surrounding landscape or something. You don't actually need the ditch, right? So why go through the effort of digging the ditch? Oh, you need to dig the ditch to create the mound. No, you don't. You don't. You're making more work for yourself. You could just cut sods of earth from the surrounding field, right? That's what you can do, right? So now there we go. There's me, and there's Anne, and there's Goff, right? So we're all sat there, and I can say we can't go on the mound, and Goff is saying yes, you can. You can go into the ditch. You can stand. No, you can't, because the mound, that's a barrier. The ditch is a barrier. You might be able to go into the ditch and onto the mound, but it's a barrier. It's saying that that's where the ancestors are. That's the reason for the ditch. The ditch is a mental barrier as much as a physical barrier. Have you ever been on a train and they say, oh, I used to go on the train with my grandparents in the 1980s and 1970s. And in the 1980s, there used to be the guard cabin. You were not allowed to go to the guard cabin, but there was a door into it. Anyone could go into the guard cabin. You were not allowed to go into the guard cabin. But none of us went into the guard cabin. I bloody did. And I used to chat to the guard in the guard cabin, right? But then I'd actually go back to my grandparents and say, where have you been? I've been to the guard cabin. You're not supposed to go to the guard cabin, but there was a door into the guard cabin, right? It's the idea of being told that you're not allowed to go into the guard cabin, that nobody ever went into the guard cabin. For example, you go into Cardiff and people say, oh, you can't go into a gay club because straight people are not meant to go into a gay club. Of course, straight people are meant to go into a gay club, right? There's nothing wrong with going into a gay club, right? But there's a barrier there. People say you shouldn't go into a gay club. You can go into a gay club. It's perfectly fine going into a gay club. But there's this idea that you shouldn't go into a gay club, right? And it's that mindset. You don't go there, right? When I was a child, my parents used to say, don't go into the public toilets. Dirty old men hang around in public toilets. You wouldn't go into public toilets. But there was never any dirty old man in the public toilets, but you didn't go in them. I was petrified about going into public toilets, so I'd pee around the back of the public toilets, right? No, I'm being serious. The point is that there's this perception that you can't do things and you don't do things. It's exactly the same as this. It's the same. I think maybe Goff said this the other week or whenever we did it when we were looking at the flooding of Doggerland. Don't eat fish because fish are the products of the sea. So you don't eat fish because to eat fish you got to go near the sea. We don't want to go near the sea because we might die, right? That happened hundreds, if not 1,000 years ago, right? So you don't go near the sea, so you don't eat the fish. People say that fish eat the bodies of shipwrecked sailors, right? Well, most of them probably wouldn't anyway, right? Well, how many bodies are out there for fish to eat? So you don't eat fish. So there's all these preconceptions that you shouldn't do things, and that's what the ditch is. The ditch represents that you shouldn't go on the bank.
Karl, it's the same as not stepping under a ladder or not killing an albatross. If you don't do it, why don't you do it? Or you don't do it. The same. I get what you're saying. I totally agree.
It's the same as
it's a deterrent. It's a deterrent.
Well, albatross and going under a ladder, that's superstition. So maybe that's the same. That's what was in their minds when they built it.
It can happen, can't it? It's like, it's a risk assessment. Do you walk under
albatross thing, you may never do that. Because it
Or
brings
don't step on one of those grills, you know. You know, like
Yeah,
the
well,
old-
because if you got heels, exactly.
yeah.
But do you know it's the same? I don't even know if this is true. I've never looked it up. You're not supposed to hit or harm or kill one of the swans because you'll be put in prison by the Queen or something. You know what I mean? So
absolutely.
the
You're not
Queen's
allowed to go
swans.
into the ladies' toilets.
Yeah, it's true, but they'd
Well,
have to find you,
well-
wouldn't they?
Yeah, no, actually, it's not against the law to go into the ladies' toilets. So Goff is right.
But you don't, do you?
You don't go into a ladies' toilet.
Well, we don't. Maybe you do, Carl, but I
Yeah,
don't.
no, actually, Goff, there's a confession, right? When we used to have the archaeology classes in the pub in Bridgend years ago, I used to find the female toilets much better than the men's, right? So I used to go into the female toilets, and then unfortunately, sometimes women would come in. Oh, and women, when they're on the toilet, it sounds disgusting. Right, anyway, move on. Right, so Goff, what I'm going to say, I know you're saying you agree with me and what I'm said, but what I want you to do is I want you to push it a bit further forward. What else does this tell you? What does this see? What else can you see? Maybe that I haven't seen it. If you can see something else.
Well, obviously the mound is sacred, isn't it? For some reason, it's sacred. You can't go there. You go the ditch. You're not allowed to go there. So, you know, that's obvious. But what is it that's there? Is it the ancestors? What is it?
It's right, but basically, when you look at this, you've got you've got burial. They've got a strange burial practice. The causewayed enclosures, for example, which are sort of around this time, a little bit later, but we can't really date everything retrospectively or whatever. But basically, you're exposing human remains. Basically, what you've got the string of sausages, causewayed enclosure. You've got a platform in the middle. You put a body on it. Over a few months, the body decays, eating away at birds and animals, and then the long bits of the bone left are then put in the ditch around the outside. Well, where do your ancestors go? Because it's not very comfortable. So it's the idea that the ancestors are actually going to these avenues. They're going to the causewayed enclosures, or they go into Silbury Mound, for example, Marlborough Mound, or the other mounds, or they're going into these monuments, or they're going into the souterrains, the places underground. So it's
just imagination, isn't it? It's like, saying it's heaven. It's like saying heaven. They're just invisible.
Yeah, but they're not. They're not invisible because you've got the mound.
Oh, I thought you told me there weren't any remains in it.
No, we're talking about bloody ancestors. The ancestors are in the mounds. The spirits of the ancestors.
Yeah, the spirits of the
Yeah, that's what we're talking
ancestors.
about.
Yeah.
The bones are causewayed enclosures and all the other stuff that goes on. So
he's right. But Goff is right that it's sacred. It's like sacred. You don't go on there. You look at it.
You're not supposed to step on a grave. You go to a graveyard, you don't step on
Yeah,
it.
I mean that.
Oh,
no, you don't.
That's
don't.
true. We
Yeah.
were always taught that not to step on graves.
This is why I think it's really abhorrent that when you go to churches and what they've done is reuse gravestones from somewhere else as steps and stuff on a church. I think that's absolutely terrible. At Gethley Gaia Church years ago, a few years back, somebody nicked all the gravestones from Gethley Gaia Church, right? Where were these gravestones? They'd been used as a path.
Yeah.
Well, why are people walking on people's bloody graves that have been moved from somewhere else? That's just absolutely terrible. It is. I've taken lots of people into church graveyards, and it's always that if there's a gravestone there and you've got to walk on it because there's no other way, I usually apologize, right? I don't have to, but I feel terrible for walking on the grave, right? But that's the way it is. And the other hang on, the other thing as well is this is the other point, right? We're talking about bodies actually being under those gravestones, or gravestones that have been moved from somewhere else. But say we're talking about bodies being underneath the gravestones. That's different from a mound where there's no human remains.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Sorry.
what you're saying is you think that the stones that were on the graves, marking the graves, somehow were inhabited by the ancestors. So those stones were sacred. So they should
Yeah.
be made into pathways.
Actually, Anne, right, that is absolutely brilliant. That is genius, because you are very, very right. That stone, if you read it in a graveyard, says a person died in 1843. They had a wife, they had children, they had this and that. They were Davy Jones or whatever, right? That itself is the embodiment of the person. I don't give a damn what anyone. Oh, it's only a frigging stone. It's not a bloody stone. I tell you what, mate, right? You bury your grandmother in a church graveyard. I'll use that as a marker in a pathway. Let's see how you feel. Oh, you can't do that. No, you can't walk on these gravestones either, whether they've been moved from, but the body's over there. No, the body might be over there, but this gravestone embodies the person's spirit. And you are very right, Anne.
You could see it like that.
No, we are going to see it like that. No, I'm going to see it that way. That's the way I see it.
Okay.
Well, you've put it out there, and I've owned what you've said. I completely agree
Yeah,
with
all
what
right.
you said.
Okay. Well, that's that's the way that your logic is, you know. So the logic of the Neolithic put on our situation in a
Yes,
way.
yeah, you are correct there, Anne. You are very right. Yeah, I will go with that. Oh my God, this is so good. This is so good. So, oh my God, we're going to talk a little bit more now as well. So, and somebody said about this. They've said about this lecture today. They've said it's a beautiful lecture. These lectures, what we've been doing today. They've learned so much. Thank you very much for watching. But anyway, so what we're going to do now, we're going to look at a few more notes. I want to tell you about these bank barrows from another text. We've done a lot of talking, we've done a lot of interpretation and so on. So that's what we're going to. Let's have another little bit of a bank barrow up there, because I know what Goff's going to say. Oh, I'm not paying all this money for not looking at much images today. I've had to look at you. But secretly, Goff comes to my classes just to really, he loves me, really.
Yeah.
Oh, of course, we all love you.
Yeah.
I know you do. Except for Jim.
Oh, he loves you. Yeah, he's a secret lover, definitely.
Yeah, I think he is. This is what stalkers are like.
Yeah, you're right. You ought to be locked up.
Who's Jim?
You know Jim.
Jim.
Don't you know Jim?
Jim used to be one of our Lansford Major people.
Oh, you mean he's not with us anymore? Oh, I know. You don't mean Jim from...
No, this is another Jim.
Oh, right, okay.
No, not that Jim. This is the other Jim. Jim
is is an ancestor now.
No,
It's
no,
all
this
right.
is another Jim.
Yes, okay.
No. All right, and we've had two Jims from Lansford Major. This is another Jim.
Oh, 3.
No, well, my God, no. When did we get 3? There's 2 Jims. All right, yeah, we had a Jim in Bridgend.
Oh,
No, not that Jim.
Did we? Oh, yeah. Oh.
Oh my God! Please help me, please. Right, this is Longbredy Bank Barrow on Martins Down, Dorset. So it obviously dominates the landscape. you can see that there's a bit of a gap in it there, and the whole point of this is that we believe that bank barrows were added to and extended. So, and that's the thing, they were not one event. It occurred over a period of time, so it was a progression. It was like an idea, and this is a thing. I've got to say this, and I say this a lot, and I'm going to say it again. We've said it. We've said what we feel that this was. Gough said it. I've said it. You've said it, Anne, right? But maybe over time, the idea of the bank barrow changed, right? And because it remained within the landscape amongst other monuments for thousands of years, remember there's 6,000 years and it's still within the landscape, not plowed out and not destroyed. Obviously, people saw it as different things. We've got evidence of the one at Maiden Castle in Dorset that there may have been totem poles around it, because there's posts that have been placed onto it later on. Right, they've been added to. They've been part of the landscape, what people saw and what people interpreted. And maybe what we've got is later burials placed into it. Now, Anne, you asked me. You said, but there was no burials in there. Anne, this is a bank barrow of the day. If people put burials onto it later on, that's not part of its original purpose. So I need to make that clear, Anne. Okay?
Yeah.
It was not used initially for burial. If somebody in the Bronze Age puts a burial in it, which is 2,000 years after it was built, that is a different thing, right? Okay. So bank barrows, sometimes referred to as barrow banks, or a ridge barrow, or a ridge mound. Well, unfortunately, the ridge barrow and a ridge mound makes it sound a bit like an agricultural feature, right? And I want to go off on a little bit of a tangent there, but the word barrow, you can have a rabbit barrow, you can have a rabbit warren, barrow, or bar can mean a hill with trees on it.
Barrow.
No, barrow.
Oh, a rabbit barrow.
You can have a pillow barrow or a pillow mound.
Yeah. Okay.
Barrow, not burrow, barrow. So oh God, you've completely bloody lost my plot now. But the one thing I am going to say, right, is that these as a specific monuments were identified by the great geographer archaeologist, Ordnance Survey guy, O.G.S. Crawford, who looked at a lot of Ordnance Survey stuff in 1938. This is where we get the terminology from, 1938. So long bready one itself, there it is. Lots of these in the United Kingdom, they take the form of a long, sinuous, parallel-sided mound or bank. Okay, bank, approximately uniform in height and width along its length, and usually flanked by ditches on either side. Usually, were they all flanked with ditches either side? They may be the result of a single phase of construction, or be the result of the addition of one or more linear extensions to the bank of a pre-existing barrow. Now, we've got to be very careful using the word barrow, because the word barrow, as we saw with the earlier lecture, or a mound, might be interpreted as a burial mound. Right, so the word barrow can have different meanings. Barrow is named after the word barrow with a mound of earth with trees on it. So or barrow in furnace. Basically, the word barrow in that is a load of referring to trees. Right, so you know it can have various different meanings. It can also be marked as a tumulus, but a tumulus with no grave.
Yeah.
So although when we look at these, later burials have been found in them, but not in the initial thing, and there's no such thing as any burial chambers have ever been identified in these bank barrows. So you know they are very important, significant monuments. They do tell us a lot, and they do help us sort of understand where we are in this period in time. So one image that I haven't actually got here, and I just think if we got it there, love it. that typically looks like a big sort of long barrow, right? But this one is in a place called Pentridge in Dorset, a possible bank barrow near Pentridge in Dorset. The barrow comprises two distinct parts: the taller, narrower part, tree covered, to the northeast, and the wider, flatter part, grass covered, to the southwest, which is not really shown there. These parts are 50 and 90 meters long, respectively. Although they have been considered to be two conjoined long barrows, probing and aerial photography have revealed them to have a common continuous ditch, now ploughed out, and no burial. Another suggestion is that the eastern part is a classical long barrow, with the eastern part as a tail that was added later. So you can't always work out whether they definitely are or not, right? So the next one we're going to go on to is Maiden Castle, and I might take a little pee break, but so what we've got is between 10 and 20 bank barrows identified in Britain. And what we've mentioned a lot about the ones in Dorset, but there's one in actually Staffordshire as well. So which is Long Low Bank Barrow in Staffordshire. So we're standing to move a little bit further up from Dorset. And we've obviously got these ones that we're talking about in Dorset at Bank Barrows. So what I'd like to do now, we're not going to have a proper break. I need to take a pee break, and I will be back. So what I want to do is get that off, right? That's what women say to me all the time. Get them off. And just give me a second, and I'll be back now. You two talk about the cricket amongst yourselves. Apparently, Gough is intrigued that the women's cricket team is doing better than the men's. Talk about it.
Oh, the women's team. Well, there's not a lot of competition, I suppose, you know, to get oh, I don't know why I said that. No, the women's rugby were doing better, weren't they? Or was it football?
Aren't they? That's
I
why.
don't know what's happened to the cricketers. They're just
Who cares?
Hmm?
Who cares?
Oh, my husband likes cricket.
That's women's cricket, I expect, is it?
I'm back again. I'm going to tell you another anecdotal story, which I've told you loads of times, and Gough is going to go, "Oh, yeah, we bloody go again." You know, for about 5 years, I used to go to my grandparents every Sunday, and it's just over a period of 5 years, they used to have cricket on every single Sunday when cricket was on, and then they would have snooker and darts and tennis. Those were my types of grandparents. They like the ball games. Anyway,
Anything with a ball, yeah.
Yeah. What's that, Rog? Hey?
Anything with a ball.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Anne likes things with balls. Anyway, so long story short, I went over. I went over this one every Sunday. They said this is LBW, and what it would be, there would be this guy standing in the middle of the pitch, right? And they would focus in on him, and it was this Asian guy, right? And I thought, great, this is LBW, and 5 years go by now. I go into my parents' house, and they focus in, and the guy is from like he's a white guy from South Africa. And I said, my God, LBW, he's changed his race. And they looked at me and said, no, that's not his name.
No.
It means length before wicket.
I could have thought that as well.
You know, I really
That's what I used to get.
I like this Indian bloke, right? He had really nice features, right? And I was really peed off that there was this white guy who was LBW. I thought, how dare you change your race? And it meant length before wicket.
Yeah.
What an
How was
absolute
that?
clown. But anyway, what we're going to do now, we're going to look at an image of Maiden Castle, and we're going to.
I didn't even know he liked sports. You know, I know he liked football, but
Who?
Joe, at cricket and bowls and
Oh, the thing is, Joe likes playing with his balls, doesn't he?
yeah. Oh,
And we're terrible. We're terrible. You know, I'm absolutely terrible. I'm vulgar. I am.
well,
Um,
you know, we've had all this. We've had all this before for years. I mean,
I know we have. Goff. What I'm going to do, right, is I think I'm going to.
Poor old Joe.
Those people have been very loyal to me over the years, right? Like Goff and you, and I might give you a free ticket to my live performance, the first one.
Where?
You're on. You're on.
Where is it?
Birmingham Centre.
But Birmingham Centre. No, it may probably be the first one will be in the drill hall in Chepstow.
In Chepstow?
Yeah, because it got beautiful. Well, Goff will pick you up. You can go together with Eleanor.
Oh, Chepstow. I want to move to Chepstow.
Look, just shut up. Look, I want to get on with this. Now, give it a break. Goff, did you see I was really firm with her then, and she snapped.
Yeah, she's gone though.
She went across my knee and I slapped her, and that was it. Right, okay. Right, the problem is you can't slap a hand because you probably enjoy it. Right, okay. So what we're looking at the image, this is a high resolution LiDAR image of Maiden Castle. And what you can see is the outline of the Iron Age fortress at Maiden Castle. This bank over on the right is a Bronze Age bank. That sort of square thing there, I think that square thing there, these two square things are from the Roman period. And actually, you can just about see the bank barrow, that there from the entrance there, all the way across. That's the bank barrow. Now, interesting enough, it might not look a lot, right? But up until about the 1700s, it showed out really firmly on the landscape. It was a really clear monument. So this Neolithic long mound bank barrow is some 546 meters and 2 centimeters and 1 millimeter in length, comprising a bank of earth between two parallel ditches. Now, to give you an idea, the mound itself is 19.5 meters across on average. And it's not a straight line. It sort of follows a slight curve. It's a slight curve, that is. And across the interior of Maiden Castle. Now, that itself is the first monument there ever. That was the first monument constructed. That was the one in the Neolithic period. And it suggested that section of Bank Barrow it suggested that itself is kept intact and revered over this very, very long period of time. The people in the Bronze Age didn't demolish it and use the soil, and people in the Iron Age didn't demolish it and use the soil. You know, they just carried on. They just carried on with it within the landscape.
But that's a LiDAR image, so it's really it's covered in grass, isn't it?
Yes, it's very difficult to make out now. However, up until the 1600s, it was very clear. They just ploughed it out, and you can see all the plough lines on the landscape. They ploughed it all out, which is really, really unfortunate. However, only excavation could demonstrate chronological precedence for any given section of the monument. So basically, the three elements of the monument, the two ditches on either side, and obviously the bank itself. So it basically says that it appears here. This is the expert saying it appears not to have performed as a funerary function. So there's no burials with it. There's nothing, but may have acted rather as a symbolic barrier or territorial divide. Well, that's a bit daft, really. That doesn't make sense. It really doesn't, because I'm going to read that out again, and I'm going to tell you why I don't believe this. Acted rather as a symbolic barrier or territorial divide. Now, the word territorial divide, back in the Neolithic period, there were so few people that having a little bit of an area with a long sort of bank and a ditch across it, right, would be absolutely pointless. Why bother, right? Just move somewhere else. This idea of a symbolic barrier, now that's an interesting one. The ditch is the barrier. I like that one. We've been talking about that. It has been excavated on at least 3 occasions by Mortimer Wheeler in the mid-1930s, 1936, I think, by another prehistorian, 1951, and Neil Sharples, who's still with us, in the 1980s, 1985. Now, it was resurveyed. Now, what Sir Mortimer Wheeler encountered was as follows. Wheeler's excavation told us that the soil throughout the mound was the same. There were no layers. In other words, it was created at one stage, at one moment in time. But what he found was it almost seemed that there were some kind of post holes that were seemingly later. And also, he found 2 Saxon dating from about the 600 inhumations buried towards the east end of the barrow. Why did the Saxons bury people in this mound? Why? That is really interesting. Were these Saxons who called themselves Saxons but were actually native Britons? Where were they from? But just think about that. Just think about that a moment. People were deliberately took their burials, their human remains. They carried human remains. Human remains are not sort of light. So you carry 2 sets of human remains. You bury them deliberately within this mound. So you're talking about 600 years AD. If this was built 6,000 years ago, right? That's 4,600 years later. Somebody puts human remains in it.
Yeah.
That's they went through they knew that this mound was important. They felt it was important. And what they found is obviously, these burials, from the 600s. And again, a little bit more information on this, and I'll just, we're gone past 12:30, so that's fine. We got a little bit longer as well. So this itself, when the hill fort wasn't there, and this was the only monument there, it would have been seen for miles around because it was 430 feet above Ordnance Survey. Basically, it followed the saddleback of the ridge or the hill. And it would have been white chalk that they would have used, and like white sort of offy color chalk. So that would have shot out within the landscape massively. That point is important. So it's deliberately placed so as to be wholly visible from the lower ground. The long mound, as I said, so using the word long mound of our bank barrow. The ditches were filled in, but it actually remained as a bank. It remained as a bank. And it was still very, very visible in the 1600s. So the work of Sir Mortimer Wheeler, and basically showing us that the same material is to be found when excavating the mound. And just a sort of a little bit last here, really, is talking about the ditch. The ditches themselves, it was a flat bottom ditch, but they had steep sides. This is helpful. The ditches themselves were up to 15 feet across, and 2 meters deep. So a flat bottom but steep side. So in other words, with this example, you weren't meant to get onto the mound. You weren't meant to go there. Over time, it filled up with sort of silts and was sort of backfilled in the later Neolithic period with sort of pottery and all the debutage and all the rest of it. And in the Bronze Age, it was filled in. In the Iron Age, it was filled in, right? So in other words, what we do have is that this is revered. The bank is revered, and it's used for later burials over time. On that bit, I'm going to mention, I don't know if anyone's got anything that they want to say on YouTube. It's gone really quiet now. So what we're going to do, we're going to call that a day. And we're going to see if there's any questions from my multitudes gathered here. Right, Anne. Anything you want to say, darling?
Well, no, I must admit we haven't gone into. We didn't have LiDAR images when we did Maiden Castle a while back, and you know, it's nice to be able to investigate a bit deeper, really. I mean, you can do it like Mortimer Wheeler did it, and, you know, by hand sort of thing. And but this is giving you more up-to-date information about the Maiden Castle Hill.
It's given us more oblongons.
Yeah. And yeah, it's I don't know, yeah, it's fascinating.
Thank you. So okay, thank you for that, Anne. Is there anything you'd like to say, Goff, my darling?
Oh, these places were obviously very very, very special, weren't they, to the people? And if they were still burying them in the 16th century, although sorry, the Saxons were still burying there.
Yeah.
Must have been a very special place. People respected. Yes. So, yeah. Where's the nearest bank barrow to where we are now?
Staffordshire. The one in Staffordshire, I would say. Something in the back of my mind says that there might be one in Wales, but I can't hone in on that thought. I don't think there is.
No.
Is that St Geneth Dyke? That's a dyke, is it?
Yeah, that's a dyke. St Geneth Dyke's a dyke for a big deer park. Yeah. So that's the answer to the question. You know, I'm gonna type in this again. Hang on, if I can get sort of.
I could take you to a Causewayed enclosure.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
you yes, that's true. Bank barrows in Britain. Obviously, we've got one on Barrow in Furness, so that's in Cumbria. There's not thousands of them, in other words. And unfortunately, if you type in bank barrows, you come up with the Nat West.
I thought you would.
But it's coming up with long barrows every time. So
surely
you know.
they can't have plotted all.
No.
Them, you know, there could be lots more, but
there could be lots more, but misinterpreted. And also, what you're thinking about is the long barrows may have actually cut into earlier bank barrows. So the long barrows have then occupied the space of bank barrows.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yes, they're very fascinating. Very fascinating monuments, I would say. Very, very fascinating.
Yeah, so they're sort of different. They are developing more intellect, I suppose, or I don't know, to have these well, to you know, what to do with the dead, really.
Yeah, exactly. Or the ancestors.
The ancestors, yeah. I mean, that's really still apparent, you know, in Red Indian, you know, Native American culture. They still talk about their ancestors, and they still have special grounds and things, you know, areas.
Oh, and that was one of the key things that we were doing when I was doing my postgraduate diploma in archaeology. We saw this sense of special sacred places and localities.
Well, we do, don't we? We have cemeteries. And
yeah,
we have cemeteries. Yeah, yes. We do.
Oh, human beings. It must be just change what they do. You know, we have graveyards. the Indians have their sacred places. We have their sort of sacred places, like the
And the
Kola.
Ganges, don't forget the Ganges.
They are the Ganges, yeah.
Up the Ganges.
Yeah, so we're not that different from those people, are we?
No,
No.
we're not. The thing is, you see, I don't think we don't connect as we do with our ancestors as much as they did. You know,
Mhm.
it was almost as if it was a special place for them.
Mm.
That's right.
It's a cemetery. Unfortunately, cemeteries, you know, it's not as a special place. Cemeteries as
Crematorium grounds is sort of, you know, quite special because you've got all sorts of different places you can put the remains, you know, either a tree or a something in the wall or under a rose bush, or so you imagine that, yeah, you could really say that the ancestors are all around, really all around you in that way.
Exactly.
You know.
Exactly. You know, but it's just a shame that, you know, we've got cemeteries today, and, you know, if you think, oh right, I've got to see my granddad, you know, and it's 12 o'clock at night, it would seem to be really weird, but yeah, well, it would be, but that's really bad to go to a cemetery at night. But for these people, visiting their ancestors and trying to connect with their ancestors would be a common thing. It'd be what they did as part of their society.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't have a telly, did they?
They didn't have a telly, and
They didn't have a telly, no.
They didn't have Anne either. They didn't have Anne.
No. And the cemetery would be locked. You'd have to climb over the wall. But
Exactly.
graveyards, you could get into graveyards. But not many people are buried in graveyards now.
Well, they always have been.
Anyway,
They always have been
What?
buried in graveyards.
No, they used to be, but there's no spaces anymore.
Well, I've got a space. We've got a family one.
Oh, well, that's different, isn't it?
oh well, just think, Goff, I could cuddle up with you, couldn't I?
You can't have a headstone. You used to be able to get a headstone. You can't do that now. And say in Cardiff, for instance, you can't have a headstone. You have to have a flat stone on the ground, and so they can cut the grass.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's all changed, hasn't it? Yeah.
Because, you know, people put a big monolith up, a big statue of an angel, and then they, you know, they die, and the kids don't bother. And I mean, how often do I used to go regularly to my parents' grave, but I haven't been for about 5 years, I suppose.
Oh God,
No,
yeah.
my parents are in Newport, and I haven't been for years.
When I die, I'll be going in with the rest of the family, and my kids hopefully will come and see me. And yeah, well, you never know.
Where's
never
that
know.
then, Goff? Where is it?
Yeah, well, hang on, don't bloody prepare things for him, for
Oh, no.
God's sake.
Well, you've got to think of these things, Anne. I mean, you make a will, you've got to prepare for your death. Yeah.
Yeah. My parents are in St. Wooler Cemetery, and they're in their own plot, but I don't know if anyone will go there after.
We
It's
went
more
to
traditional. It's more traditional, I think, in Wales, in the valleys and that. Is that
Yeah.
where you're from?
No,
No.
I was going to tell you, we went to this year we went to the Emmerdale village,
Oh yeah.
and you probably watched Emmerdale. And in Emmerdale, there's a graveyard. They pick the graveyard. So I was asking the guide, I said, well, where are all the gravestones? Because there's proper gravestones. And you look at the show, you'll see the graves, you know. So it looks like the village plot, you know.
Mhm.
And she said, oh, they got them from London. They were not, they claimed a cemetery in London. So they purchased all the headstones and took them to, and on them it says, you know, you read the names, and it's not like, you know, Kane Dingle. It's, you know, Fred Bloggs from Lambeth. You know, it's.
Oh no, I don't watch it, but I will now.
Really,
Hang on. So hang on a minute. So the bodies have disappeared in London,
not the
and they
bodies.
No, the bodies are still there.
The bodies are still wherever they were, and they just bought them to
It's
build
just
them.
the gravestones.
And they built that, whatever they built, the supermarket, petrol station, Asda, on the graveyard. And the ITV, or whoever it is, bought all the headstones and took them to Emmerdale, to the village, for the show. So it looks like a natural sort of old-fashioned Yorkshire graveyard. You're
Oh
gonna,
dear, now you're going to upset Carl now. He's going to write to them.
yeah, well, I think you ought to.
No, well, the thing is, at least their names have been revered. It's a shame that the bodies ain't there as well.
That's true. So when, like, Kane Dingle's looking at the gravestone of his granny, he's not, he's looking at Fred Bloggs from Lambeth. Yeah, really spooky, isn't it? We're funny,
That
aren't we?
is-
Yeah.
That is strange.
Well, you know, it's different all over the world.
But what I'm thinking now, you know, in hundreds of years' time, the Carl of that time will go up to Yorkshire and see all these headstones, let's say from Lambeth and Bracknell and wherever. And they say, how the hell did they get up there?
Yeah.
And there'll be a big
Well, it would be worse if it was Crossroads.
What do you mean? Well, yeah, well, crib
Crossroads
down,
was
didn't it?
finished years ago. And that was like on at the same time, wasn't it? Oh,
Yeah, it did.
oh well, not to worry. I'm going now.
Very thought-provoking, this lecture, Carl. Very thought-provoking.
I'm glad it's been thought-provoking,
Well,
and it's just
I-
that's what we're meant to do.
The problem is I've got my parents are in a grave, but most other people, myself and my other brother are going to be cremated. And one is going to be buried in somewhere up the valleys. Somewhere up the valleys. But I don't know. With all these cremated remains, I did think that we do need to have a grave somewhere to put them all in.
Where are all these graves under your house? Where are all these cremations under your house or something?
Oh, you mean, well, I mean, there's going to be probably about 6 cremations that have to go somewhere eventually.
Right.
No, maybe 2.
Make up your bloody mind.
3.
I think the Carl's family, they got a mausoleum, and they Hulton Road.
Oh,
Is that right?
a mausoleum.
Yeah, we got a pretty snazzy job at the Barry Cemetery.
It's
Oh.
Barry, yeah, very famous.
Oh.
Exactly.
Oh, well, all I know is that oh no, we can't talk about this. Have you stopped recording?
No, we've been recording ever since.
Oh,
Going live.
We're live. Hopefully my stalker Jim's watching. He probably is, you know.
yeah. All right then. Well, nice to see you. I'm going now. I'm going to have something to eat. Okay.
Going
Right,
to bed.
so, right, okay. What I'm going to ask, is there any other questions from Anne or Goff?
No more. That was great. Thank you.
So we look forward to seeing you next week at 7 o'clock. It's been an absolute delight, and we've got through quite a lot tonight. And thanks for Goff and Anne's contribution. And I got all the shekels off everyone, so that was good. If there's no other questions, I will see you next week. And thanks for your support. Thank you very much, Goff and Anne.
Bye. Bye.
Take care, Goff and Anne. Bye-bye. Take care. Bye-bye. 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 My God, that lecture was really long. Anyone who's just come on, yeah, so you need to look at the beginning. We've done lots really. We've been following the line and looking at Tim Ingall's work within archaeology, and we've continued that with looking at the perspectives of how to follow and interpret what we're looking at with Norman sites and Roman sites and so on. So we've done all that this week. So watch from the beginning. We'll be doing more of this next week. We're starting just before 6 next week, and we go all the way through to now. So it's been a really, really long lecture. So we've kept it going. So we've done Neolithic Bank Barrows, and it's all been really good. Anyway, thanks for everybody watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If anyone wants to join, press the blue join button down below. Lots of content in this, so just watch it. A lot of fun as well. So anyway, thanks for everyone watching this. We've had sort of 5 people online watching from the beginning, and sort of 2 of my actual live paying students. So that's been really good. So if there's any questions anyone wants to ask now, you need to put it in the box. I'm going to hang around for a minute to answer any questions. If not, then we'll just call it a day. So right, you go. I go right. Any questions? Any questions? Nope. So let's just see if there's any questions. I'm looking at my phone as well. There we go. Right. Okay. I think that's done today. I'm just going to see if there's anything in the chat box. Okay. Fire's been on ever since, so that's really good. So that's been good. I'll have a little lie down. And so we've got 6 people watching now. Right, everybody who's watching, just watch from the beginning because we're finishing now. Like, subscribe and join. So thank you very much. It's been a good one. So I'm off. Oh yeah, was there anything in the chat box? Did meet in chat? Nothing in the chat box. Nothing in the chat box. Okay, right, I'm going to call that a day now. Anyway, thanks everybody. And next week Thursday, 6 o'clock, just before 6. Next week Tuesday, about 7:30. And next week we're obviously more Neolithic stuff next week. Thank you very much. I'm off. Take care. Goodbye. That's been a blast.